Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1297 of the War News stream. And we got a lot of stuff happening today. We're seeing an armed standoff right now near the Baltics between NATO and Russia. We're also hearing that Ukraine attacked Russia's largest oil port near St. Petersburg. Also, Russia admits that all peace talks have ended with the United States, and Belarus prepares an Oreshnik nuclear missile test, apparently in the coming weeks. So very big news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be making sure to cover the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as 60,000 troops of Poland and Lithuania have amassed near the area of the Suwalki Gap in preparation for the Russian Zapad 2025 military exercise, which is believed by many to be a possible cover for a ground invasion of NATO if the Russian Federation was to decide at this moment that the time for World War III is now. They are also being joined by a fleet of 17 warships comprised of multiple nations of the NATO armed forces that are currently inside the Baltic Sea, which will also be conducting a joint operation at the same time as the Iron Defender 2025 military exercises conducted by Poland and Lithuania. Joined also by the naval and ground exercise is Operation Eastern Sentry, a multinational air operation which is now based inside of Poland, involving aircraft of the Danish, French, and German air forces alongside those of the Polish Air Force, which will be conducting air defense actions in the area of the exclusion zones, which have been declared inside of Polish, Lithuanian, and Latvian airspace. Speaking of exclusion zones, we were able to hear that multiple countries, including Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, have all closed off their airspace to any forms of civilian flights, at least within a shore area near to the border. If Russian drones enter this area, orders have been given to shoot down those drones or aircraft on site. We have also been able to hear that the Russian Federation is conducting a naval exercise as a part of the Zapad 2025, with the Northern Fleet setting sail today into the area of the Barents Sea and the Norwegian Sea to conduct those training exercises within that area. That is actually incredibly close to the last reported position operations of the USS Gerald R. Ford's Carrier Strike Group. Meanwhile, inside the Russian Federation, the domestic situation is continuing to worsen, as we have been able to see further information showing that the Russian fuel shortage is now gripping the entirety of Western Russia, well ahead of projected schedule, and we've also been able to hear that the Russian Federation is currently conducting a bit of an economic slump, or more so a major crisis economically. The Ukrainians have also hit the port of Primorsk within the northern area of the Russian Federation within the Leningrad Oblast. This port is incredibly similar to that of the one found at Ust-Luga, and is also important for the Russian Federation to be able to export their vital fuel products and natural gas to the greater world at large. The French Republic is also now procuring a brand new intercontinental ballistic missile, one more potent and deadly than those prior, once again as a part of their nuclear deterrence against the Russian Federation and the enemies of our Western alliance. We have also been able to hear further news inside the Republic of Poland that the Republic of Poland has quite literally shut down the border with Belarus entirely. All railroad and road crossings as of this moment have been shut down, and the Polish armed forces are posting these areas as if they were possible grounds for a Russian invasion, which is somewhat likely, at least at the moment. Inside the Middle East, we've been able to get additional news and information that the Israeli attack on Qatar appears to have had absolutely no U.S. approval whatsoever, which has caused a great deal of ire and frustration within the U.S. government, as it appears that a large amount of F-16s and F-35s of the Israeli Air Force actually flew within the area of the Red Sea, firing their missiles over Saudi Arabia towards their targets in Qatar, apparently to avoid detection by U.S. forces, so that way they could be called off at the last minute. This has started to cause a great deal of issues in the foreign policy standing between the United States and the State of Israel, and we have been able to hear that while some are saying that the Israeli action was justified, others are saying that the Israelis are largely becoming a rogue state at the moment and are even attacking allies like Qatar that have been important for U.S. strategic interest within the region. Outside of that, it does appear that the leader of the Chechen semi-autonomous republic, Ramzan Kadyrov, is actually on the way out, as we've been able to get a large amount of information that it appears that his end is most likely coming very soon, due to medical complications and issues that he's been suffering from for years. Outside of that, the Ukrainian armed forces have continued to hold their front lines today, inflicting significant casualties on the Russian armed forces, and have also continued their actions in support of the West, even providing assistance to Poland and the Baltic states to be able to find ways to deal with incoming drone forces and to dispatch them efficiently and effectively. The United States of America is still conducting further reconnaissance against the Republic of Venezuela at this moment, while the U.S. government has openly stated, through the words of the Office of the President of the United States today, that patience with Putin has run out, and we are also hearing of further tests at Edwards Air Force Base of the B-21 Raider, soon to join the B-2 Spirit as a part of our stealth strategic bomber deterrence. We have a huge amount of news to cover over the course of the past 24 hours, and this is all just the tip of the iceberg for the large part. We have loads of details and information of multiple different events and major news stories that we've already told you all about that has happened over the course of the past 24 hours alone, and we are going to be making sure...
Do you think we have enough news to cover? Like, I'm really not sure if we have enough to run a show tonight, because between all these, minor stories happening pretty much in literally every corner of the world tonight, and of course I'm being facetious, by the way, there is so much happening, folks. It is insane. And what's really crazy is right now in Europe, we're literally seeing the modern day version of an armed standoff between the NATO forces meeting up with the Belarusian and Russian forces right now inside of Belarus. So that's crazy. Like, that is an extremely tense situation happening right now. And we literally are deploying more NATO troops to the border, to that area, literally right this second. So crazy times indeed.
It is an absolutely crazy time, folks. And Matthew is being completely sarcastic and saying we don't have enough news. This is one of the largest news days that we've seen recently. As a matter of fact, about the past week entirely has been a major news week, every single day of it. And we will be making sure to get y'all into each and every single piece of detail and information that we have of the news that has come out over the past day. And so moving us on immediately into the most major news of the day, this is going to be taking us towards the area of the Suwalki Gap itself, as we have been able to hear that the Russian Federation's Zapad 2025 military exercise has begun effective today. The Russian Ministry of Defense has published footage of the Russian armed forces conducting their exercises within the area. There's a lot of important things that we can take from this information and the videos that were provided, as well as other sorts of analytical stuff that we can infer from the footage. But I'll show you all this really quickly, and then I'll start to break down some of the stuff that we saw through the course of this footage. But here it is. Here we can see a BMP-2M with what appears to be a Motostrelki squad, or some sort of a fire team attached to the rear of the BMP-2 riding on top of it. We can also see that's been equipped with cope cages and additional armor. Oddly enough, folks, this additional armor that's on this BMP-2 has rarely ever been seen in the war in Ukraine. We have hardly ever seen a single BMP-2 that has additional factory-made armor modifications to its side skirts. Every single BMP-2 that was involved in this exercise actually did have these additional armor skirts, which clearly does show that these Motostrelki regiments, which is what's generally involved in the Zapad currently at Grodna, are all definitely from the Moscow Military District, as we generally believe that the Moscow Military District is one of the few that has actually had a decent amount of high-quality units remain intact throughout the war, generally for internal security purposes. But we can see here the BMP-2Ms passing by, and we can also see further BMP-2Ms involved in the exercise. Interestingly enough, the BMP-2M is a modification that usually has 4 Ataka anti-tank guided missiles attached in these side pylons here, which you can see on the turret. These operate similarly to that of the Bradley's TOW-2A and TOW-2B missile launchers, but instead of these being controlled by a remote control arm where they deploy once the Bradley's traveling at a low enough speed or is stationary, these are constantly deployed, meaning technically you can fire these on the move, although that really would not work too well. One thing that is interesting to note, however, is that unlike everything else in the exercise, there are no Ataka anti-tank guided missiles available to these BMP-2s, possibly suggesting that the large number of these are being expended inside the war in Ukraine, or supply manufacturing abilities in the war industry are not able to keep up with the demand for the Ataka anti-tank guided missiles that these BMP-2s would use. Nevertheless, we also got to see these guys nearly breaking their teeth when this BMP-2 rode the hill right there. We can also see them continuing to move down the training field. We can also see a rare BMP-3 there in the back. And we can also
by the way, a question I'm sure a lot of people are going to ask, and this is also a question I have myself. Where are they getting this equipment from? Because what we've been seeing basically is a widespread frontline equipment shortage on the Russian front lines in Ukraine. So where are they getting all this equipment from? And also, where have they spared the troops to bring them to this exercise in Belarus? Because right now, we're still not really sure of the exact troop deployment inside of Belarus right now, but where are they getting these guys and also this equipment?
That's a great question, actually. And they're getting this generally from the Moscow Military District. From what we were able to hear in intelligence prior to the Zapad about a month earlier, it appeared that most of the combat regiments that were going to be involved in the military exercise at Grodna, which is about 30,000 strong at this moment, well, at least that was expected. We believe that the exercise is actually far larger in number, even around the Grodna area, but all of these forces come from the Moscow Military District. And to quickly explain why these troops appear to be in better shape and condition than their counterparts in Ukraine, I have to show y'all the Russian military district map and explain how it kind of works, because it's incredibly similar, as a matter of fact, for many, to that of the People's Republic of China, at least in how it's designed and how it's functioned. So here you can actually see it right here. These are the 5 separate military districts of the Russian Federation. Each one of these has a special mission, a specialized command within a specific regional area of their district, and also has specific tasks and purpose that have been assigned to them. The Southern Military District is the one that's actually responsible for the war in Ukraine, which is headquartered out of the city of Rostov-na-Donu. Inside of the Leningrad Military District, all of their forces in the Leningrad Military District are pretty much assigned for an eventual war with NATO, and their headquarters is inside of the city of St. Petersburg, formerly called Leningrad. The Moscow Military District is actually something that is relatively new, depending on how you want to look at it. The Leningrad Military District technically emerged in late 2024 out of the Central Military District of the Russian Federation, but in the modern day, it's generally considered that the Moscow Military District is what we would call, in strategic terms, a surge district. This means that they keep a high-quality force within this area. They're pretty much what we could call the most elite or well-trained forces, if you want to call them that, although in Russia that doesn't really go far. You can really trust that as little as you can throw a stick as far, but beyond that, these forces are technically supposed to be higher quality, so that way if something happened, say like an emergency situation in the Southern Military District or in the Leningrad Military District, those combat regiments from Moscow or the Moscow Military District could be sent in either direction, and generally provide a upper hand, at least initially, because of their quality of equipment and also their training that they are supposedly supposed to possess. These are actually the troops that are involved, so basically, to narrow this down, the reason why the equipment looks so good and the troops look so well off is that these are basically Putin's parade troops that you see at the Kremlin annually conducting this exercise right now.
Interesting. So this is basically like you said, it's kind of like the best of the best for Russia, I guess you could say. And honestly, here's my thing. Why have they not used these troops on the front line? Because I get what you're saying there, but they're pulling guys off the street daily in Russia. Like they're scraping guys off the street and conscripting them still and throwing them right into the military. So why have they not used these forces? Because we were told that Russia used some of their quote unquote elite forces around the area of what was that area, by the way? They just had the recent offensive in. I forget the name of it, by the way, on the front line.
The Pokrovsk area?
Yeah, Pokrovsk. That we were told they used some elite troops there in Pokrovsk, but they weren't these guys apparently. So what's up with that?
What's up with that is that they don't want to use these guys because generally from what we would know, at least for Russian concerns, what if a Yevgeny Prigozhin mutiny happened again? These would be the troops that would meet that mutiny. That's pretty much what they are. They're here for internal security purposes. If there's an uprising, they have the cream of the crop to put them down. If there's a mutiny, they have the cream of the crop to put it down. That's why these guys really aren't used. And also, as far as the word elite is thrown around, it's a little bit of a misnomer, especially with the Pokrovsk front. They're calling them elite because they're a part of the naval infantry, but the naval infantry has this elite status to them because of their involvement in the Second World War. And modern naval infantry units and naval infantry brigades and regiments of the Russian armed forces in the war in Ukraine have shown that they are about as well off in terms of training and equipment as any Motor Strelky rifle brigade, which is also fielded by the Russian Federation. So not really elite in the sense that they are truly elite. It's more so elite in the sense they're naval infantry, and to the Russians and to the greater world, they just kind of have this historical precedent of being Russia's elite.
Interesting. Well, it's interesting to see them actually out here. So this is about all the battlefield activity they're probably going to get for a while, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and one thing that is interesting to note, though, for folks, is that this is a T-72B3, and as far as Russia's most competent main battle tanks, this actually isn't that well off. This thing is quite old, dated, and has been modernized a great deal to try and make it at least usable, but they're really not that usable. We've seen gazillions of T-72B3s get obliterated in Ukraine. And on top of that, we can also see their configuration for armor protection is fairly minimal, especially compared to what we would normally see in Ukraine at this point, because they have the minimal cope cage on top of the tank's turret, minimal side skirt armor. I mean, it's quite literally the smallest armor package that could be provided to the side skirts, and that's it. That's all of the modifications that they've given to these T-72s involved in the exercise. And we'd also see it being followed up by another extremely souped-up BMP-2M. Also, one other thing that I'd like for y'all to note is that all of them actually do have offensive markings painted onto the vehicles. This is something that does lead a decent amount of credence that they may actually be preparing still for an offensive against NATO in the midst of this exercise, because all of them do have the Z offensive marking on them. Generally, if you were not planning on an actual ground offensive where identification of friend or foe would be important, you usually wouldn't see these sorts of offensive markings on the vehicles. Nevertheless, they are there, and that still leads a decent amount of credence to the idea that this may be a cover-up for an eventual Russian war with the West. Maybe the fact that after this military exercise ends, they hover around the area for a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, and then a ground offensive begins then, or it may begin within the next few days, or it may not happen at all. It could be anything in between all of those options. But in the next clips, you'll see something a little bit more interesting. We actually see here a Ka-52 pilot preparing to operate their Ka-52, and you're about to be seeing something quite rare. A usable Ka-52. If any of y'all know anything about how the Ka-52s have fared in the war, the answer is crap. They have done bad. Most of them have been shot down. From what we know, we can record and report from video and picture evidence alone that out of about the 106 Ka-52s that the Russian Federation had in service pre-war, about 52 of them have been shot down by Ukrainian ground fire. This means that there is only about half of the operational Ka-52s that they had at the beginning of the war left in Russia, so this is a fairly rare sight. As a matter of fact, we hardly even see any helicopters of the Russian Federation operating in any combat roles in Ukraine any longer due to the significant losses that they have taken. Over the course of the whole war, the Russian Federation's rotary aviation units have suffered about a 40% loss rate across the entirety of the rotary aviation combat units. That means 4 out of every 10 helicopters has already been shot down, meaning that in real effect, the Russians have about 600 helicopters left or so. But we can actually see this Ka-52 taking off. And another interesting thing I want to point this out to y'all is that as far as military exercises go, it's always important to look at the kind of loadouts that they're giving to their equipment. And notice that this one is loaded out with S-8 unguided rockets in 2 rocket pods, meaning that it has 48 rockets available. And then you can also see over here that they have about 5 Vickers anti-tank guided missiles on a specific pylon made for them. We can also see what appears to possibly be some sort of an ECM jamming pod on the left or outer pylon right here as well. This is showing us that this force has been equipped with combat loadouts, and it is entirely possible, once again, folks, because of their armaments and their well-supplied position that they're in right now, this once again could still be the preparation for a ground invasion in NATO. I don't want to say that it's imminent. We don't know that for sure, but there is always the probable cause with these exercises and how well equipped and armed they are at the moment that this could be the potential beginning of a ground offensive. But we can see the helicopter flying over and then joining what we call the unicorn formation, 3 Ka-52s in one area. That's like seeing a white rhinoceros in the wild these days. It just doesn't happen like that. But we can see 3 of them right here, all with the same combat loadouts: ECM pods, Vickers anti-tank guided missiles, and S-8 unguided rockets. We can also see that strategic aviation was involved as well in the form of Tu-160s. Their NATO designation is the Blackjack. We can see them showing the cockpit here as the pilots, and we can also see some naval operations being conducted by the Baltic flotilla inside of Kaliningrad, simulating amphibious landings and different sorts of naval operations as well. They are also joined in turn by the Northern Fleet, which sailed from Murmansk today, including the infamous Slava-class cruisers, which all of y'all know did incredibly well in the war in Ukraine because the Black Sea Fleet had won. And I gotta ask, Matthew, how many Slava-class cruisers does the Black Sea Fleet have today?
Probably only a handful, I'd imagine, but I don't know the exact number.
None, because it was the Moskva and it got sunk within the first months of the war.
Well, then.
Yeah, it did
That's
quite well.
For them.
It did amazingly well, Matthew. And they have a couple of these, actually, in the Northern Fleet. I think they have 2 or 3 of them. But considering how well they did in Ukraine, I don't really think this thing is going to do all that well in actual practice in the open sea, even if it's a part of the Northern Fleet. But you see them showing off the pride of the fleet, the Slava class. You can also see them showing off some of the other vessels as well. We can also see them preparing to get underway some of their nuclear attack submarines. Including
Wait a minute. Isn't that the same tugboat right there that was dragging around their junkyard aircraft carrier a while back?
Don't disclose Russian state secrets.
That is the power plant for their aircraft carrier right there. That happens to be lurking around the submarine right there. Look at that. That needs to get back to the aircraft carrier. It needs pushing.
Man, the budget cuts are so bad, they're taking the power generator for the carrier and they're making it push the sub around its actual tug.
Modular design. It's a new Russian concept.
Man, it's modularity to the extreme. But we can see them getting the Yasin class underway. They love showing this one off. This was one of the longest parts of the clip. I hope that one doesn't end up like the Kursk. God forbid. That would be terrible.
That would be terrible.
Anyways, moving on from that footage that the Russians published, we do understand that the NATO response has been small. The Polish have now deployed about 40,000 troops in the Suwalki Gap, and as of today, the Lithuanians have now raised the entirety of the 1st Division, which is 17,000 men strong, to also move to the area just north of Grodna to conduct their own military exercise as a greater part of the Iron Defender 2025 military exercises that the Polish are conducting on the other side of the border. So, in short, there is about 60,000 troops right now, Polish and Lithuanian, that currently are hovering around the area of the Suwalki Gap and specifically around Grodna. Now, this is also another important thing to show you all, speaking about this military exercise. It's not far away from the Suwalki Gap. This is where that footage came from on the ground of the Zapad exercise. It's only a half-mile away from the Lithuanian border, and a matter of fact, it's only a mile and a half away from the nearest border crossing between the two countries. This is incredibly close. This is so close that a slight navigational error, as the Russians would put it, would actually put them right across the border and right inside of Lithuania. It's not out of the question that that sort of thing might end up happening. The Russians might try and test that and see how far they could get. Nevertheless, This situation is one that's somewhat tense, and the force that's currently in the area, which is about 60,000 strong, and of course I was being sarcastic in saying the NATO response was small, it's actually quite a large response. If the Russians even had the believed number that we think that they have involved in the Zapad currently, which is about 110,000, that means that the Russians, if they attempt an offensive, would have a 2-to-1 attacker's advantage. Generally, to conduct a successful offensive in modern metrics, one wants to have a 3-to-1 attacker's advantage, and that's working off the idea that you would have a comparable armed force in terms of training and also available equipment, which we would generally assume that the Russians would be able to muster up in this situation, looking at what they showed of the Zapad exercise today and what they had on the field. But at the same time, considering that they're going with a 2-to-1 attacker's advantage, they would not make it far if they conducted an offensive. Not only that, the Polish forces that are in the area, along with the Lithuanian ones, are some of the best equipped in Eastern Europe. As a matter of fact, they're some of the best equipped in the entirety of the alliance. So it would be pretty stupid, if not a fool's error, or a fool's errand at this point, for the Russian Federation to try and conduct an offensive in the Suwalki Gap just because of the ground forces that are present. Oh, and by the way, since the Russians are conducting that whole exercise with the Northern Fleet and the Kaliningrad flotilla at Baltic, it appears that NATO has also decided to throw another treat Russia's way, as we are now conducting a fleet-sized naval exercise inside of the Baltic Sea, as 17 vessels will be involved inside of this exercise, which will be comprised of Nordic countries and the United Kingdom's vessels, which will be in the area. Amongst the group of them, they actually will be able to field frigates and destroyers, as the Royal Navy does have the possession of several destroyers and different classes of frigates, which could be within the area. A large and sizable amount of firepower, and this fleet would be large enough, at least on paper, to actually conduct a blockade of the Russians at the Northern Fleet, well, actually the Baltic Fleet, inside of St. Petersburg, if a war was to actually break out. So it does appear that the response in the Baltic Sea has been modest, to say it in the most sarcastic tone. Not only that, but not only is the naval exercise and the ground exercise that the NATO forces are conducting right now quite significant in response to the Russian Federation, but we've also been able to hear the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO forces in Europe, General Grinkovich, and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte state that NATO will also be launching Operation Eastern Sentry. The operation is a direct response to the recent violations of NATO airspace, including the Russian drone incursion into Poland, and it will also be a multi-domain activity, which will commence in the coming days and continue for an undisclosed amount of time, possibly indefinitely. Within the framework of this operation, what we currently know at the moment is that Denmark will contribute 2 F-16s and an anti-air warfare frigate, which will be in the Baltic. France will contribute 3 Rafale, which has already arrived inside of Poland, and Germany will contribute 4 Eurofighter Typhoons. The United Kingdom has also expressed its willingness to support, but we do not know what type of equipment or materials they will be providing yet, but we would assume that it would be similar to that in the German response, in that it would most likely be an air squadron of 4 Eurofighter Typhoons provided from the Royal Air Force. To say that this is a decent response would be understatement. This is actually a significant response from the NATO alliance, and I gotta be honest with y'all, this is one of the few times I've actually been happy with the kind of response that we've given. The force that's been posed inside of Poland and Lithuania in terms of ground forces alone is so sizable that a Russian attack in this area would be fruitless in terms of the progress it would make. The naval display that's currently happening in the Baltic as well is also incredibly large, and is large enough that it actually would pose a threat to the Baltic fleet if they were to sail out from St. Petersburg, and specifically from Kronstadt Island, which is where they're based at. The air operation is a little bit modest, to be entirely honest with y'all, but it's not like they're lacking for air power. The Polish Air Force is always present in the area, and we already know that the Dutch came to the Polish aid during the air incursions that occurred several days ago. So this is more than an adequate response that we're seeing at the moment inside of this area of Eastern Europe, and it's also most likely going to make the Russians think twice about conducting any kind of an action. It hasn't stopped Russia, though, from running their mouth. As many of y'all would know, the Russians love to run their mouth, and they have, of course, continued to state that if the Poles do not reopen their border, there will be blood. That statement was made yesterday, and they're still making that statement as of today. But before we get into all of that about the Russian response and what the Russians are doing to simply just witnessing NATO armed superiority superiority, it does appear that a lot of people are talking about whether this is enough in terms of defense. The 17 ships in the Baltic, the 60,000 troops around the Suwalki Gap, and also the air operation is now being conducted under Operation Eastern Sentry. And Matthew, what are people thinking? Well, actually, it's Eastern Sentinel. Sorry, everyone, I keep calling it Sentry. But what are people thinking about that, Matthew? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So obviously NATO's made a very large military deployment here with Eastern Sentinel, and also some people are calling it Eastern Sentinel and some are calling it Eastern Sentry. I think it's like interchangeable, I guess you could say. It really doesn't matter, but the big deal is here is NATO's launched this very large military operation here to counter Russia's deployment in Belarus, which is a very wise action, I must admit myself. So is it enough in your opinion? And 47% said yes, it will be enough for defense, while 25% said no, it's not strong enough, and 12% said what even is Eastern Sentinel. And me personally, I would say it is strong enough. 60,000 troops on the NATO side, that is definitely enough to hold off the Russians in case they were to invade a Baltic country or even the Suwalki Gap. That is enough. Our objective here is not to be able to fight a prolonged war right now. Right now, the objective with this NATO deployment is to simply be able to hold the Russians back in case they were to invade or attack one of those areas. So I would say the current deployments they pretty much go well above and beyond being able to defend against Russia at this point. So it should provide not only deterrence, but it should be an effective counterforce in case Russia were to do that. So I would say personally, I'm with the 48%. I think it is enough for defense. But obviously, if Russia did attack, we'd have to send more forces into the region. But until that happens, though, it's really unnecessary to actually do that. So I'm with the 48%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to go with the 48%. It is definitely enough for defense. And I think this is where a lot of people might be getting mixed up here. This is not a force that is supposed to be so strong that the Russians attack it. It's like throwing a rock at a tank and then we steamroll them. That's not really the purpose of the kind of armed force that we have in the area. And that would never be the purpose because generally that would be a bad idea. But I'll explain that in a second. The actual intent of the forces that we have present, of the mighty little nation of Lithuania, which I have to say is doing an incredible job for the size that they are and the economy that they have, they are truly profound. I've got to give a huge shout out to any Lithuanian viewers who are here. I have a great respect for your armed force and your country. But outside of that, the Poles are also involved as well. I also have a lot of respect for them and their armed forces as well. But this force is incredibly large. It's 60,000 strong. Even if the Russians had the number that we were expecting, about 110,000 strong in the area, that is not large enough to actually be able to conduct an offensive to close off the Suwalki Gap. So in a sense, if the Russians do start the war, they can't even take Suwalki. So what would happen is that they would hold the Russians back while everyone else from Europe raced into the area. And it's not like we're lacking in terms of force even behind this exercise. The Polish ground forces is the largest in Europe. And while they have 40,000 troops in the area, they still have about, outside of that, another 120,000 troops, full-time soldiers, that they can call on immediately that are scattered throughout the entirety of Poland. Not only that, but the whole of the U.S. Fifth Corps, for the large part, is based inside of southern Germany and southeastern Poland, and easily could move into the area within several days, meaning that a whole division-level element is in the area immediately. Actually, it would be a corps-level element, to be entirely honest with you all, because the Atlantic Resolve Division would be there in a couple of days. The full force of the Fifth Corps would be there within about a week, most likely. Then on top of that, the Germans would be there. The Baltic states are already there and could be there if they needed to, although Latvia and Estonia would be very stretched at that moment. This is a very good position for us to be in right now. This is not supposed to be a counteroffensive force. This is supposed to be a defensive force that is so strong, it's a deterrent to the Russians starting a war. And also on top of that, if they do start a war, they will hold the Suwalki Gap long enough for reinforcements to arrive, stabilize the front lines completely if they already haven't been stabilized, which they probably would have been by that point, and then immediately start to conduct counterattacks to push the Russians back. This is a great sort of a spot to be in right now. I gotta be honest with y'all, I was very concerned leading up to this that there would be absolutely no NATO response whatsoever. This response, at least from what I was expecting, is far more than adequate. It's actually superb. And it's one of the few times that I actually will say that NATO's done well.
Go ahead.
What do you got, Matthew?
Also, by the way, another thing that hasn't been considered either is since these troops are allegedly coming from the Moscow area of responsibility when it comes to their military deployments that are going into Belarus, that also leaves that area largely undefended to at least some degree or another. So that leaves them somewhat blind. Like, for example, if Russia decided to attack the NATO alliance, let's say NATO was really on the ball and they declared Article 5 really quickly, and they said, okay, we're invoking the collective defense treaty, the part of this here, and we're going to start basically acting defensively against Russia. Russia, and part of that could be attacking into Russia itself with missiles. That could be part of it. And with Russia deploying these troops from Moscow into Belarus, they're leaving that wide open back there to a certain degree. So that's also another aspect that Russia is probably going to take into account as well, is they really don't want to get caught in that scenario because it leaves them, like I said, pretty much wide open.
And I would have to agree, it would be a pretty bad situation for the Russian Federation to be in. And at this point, I think, to be honest with y'all, the defensive force that is in the area at this moment is probably going to be large enough that the Russians will think twice about starting a war with the Zapad, because they won't even be able to make any initial progress at this point with the kind of defensive force that we would have within the area. But moving on from that, we have also been able to hear further information of the Russian Federation's response to the Poles, as they have continued to threaten the Polish for the closure of the borders. Poland has responded by telling them to cry harder, and has also continued to close down the border even further today. We have been able to hear that all railway border crossings have been closed between Poland and Belarus. We can see that in these clips right here, as the Polish Republic was moving its border guard forces into the area and shutting down all railroad crossings effective immediately. And this will most likely continue into the indefinite future.
I've seen Poland deploying pretty much all the defenses of the Baltic states are deployed as well. They deployed Dragon's Teeth. They've deployed the barbed wire, or razor wire, some people like to call it. And I'm not sure what else they've done beyond that, but they've gotten a pretty good amount of physical barriers put up between their borders there. And also, Russia is still running their mouth like crazy over that. Like, Russia is pissed off beyond hell that Poland's closing their borders. I'll be honest with you, I think they're trying to find a justification for something by making that such a big issue, because I'm really not sure why they're so upset that Poland has close their borders to Belarus. That doesn't really make much sense to me.
Yeah, you know, the Russians, man, in propaganda here in America go, America is weak. They don't close their borders. Meanwhile, Poland closed their borders. They go, they start freaking out. It's like,
That's like, why?
Why? Yeah, like, why? Well, it's because they don't want that to happen for reasons. We all know the reasons, folks. You all know why. It's because the Russians want to have an easier time trying to invade Poland. But down here at Terespol, which is directly near the city of Brest, we were able to see that the Polish had set up a large amount of tank traps, because while the Polish do say that Brest is a nice place, or in short, nice Brest, they don't want that owned inside of Poland. So they've set up some anti-tank traps to make sure that if the Belarusians try and push Brest into Poland, or the armed forces around Brest into Poland, they'll be able to stop that immediately. Poland's not into that crazy shit. But we can see here the vehicles moving around continue to set up the tank traps. And also on top of that, another thing, I'm not kidding, folks, by the way, the city in Belarus is actually called Brest. I'm not even kidding. That's the name of it. But the border crossing, all jokes aside, is right here. I can actually show you all exactly where that border crossing is. It's right there. This is the one. So when y'all were watching this clip here, you can actually see it says Terespol on the border crossing building. You actually see that right here. There's further defenses on towards the main checkpoint, which is further on in the background. But nevertheless, it does appear that Poland is preparing every single eventuality and exigent circumstance at this point, so that way, if a defensive does start, Poland and the rest of NATO, for that larger matter, is going to be in an amazingly good position. On top of that, there's been significant airspace closures throughout the area, which is a part of Operation Eastern Sentinel, or Eastern Sentry, whichever one you would prefer to call it, as these airspaces will be protected by that operation that's being conducted by NATO right now. Latvia has closed off the largest amount of airspace in terms of depth with the Russian Federation. Lithuania has closed off a somewhat smaller amount, and Poland has closed off their entire border, including that of Ukraine. If any drones enter these areas, either the Polish Air Force or the NATO air mission under Operation Baltic Sentry will be the ones to conduct, or Eastern Sentry, sorry, will be the ones to conduct the shoot-down operations of those Russian drones. At this moment, we do understand that the orders are to shoot on site if any Russian aircraft or drones or missiles cross over the airspace. The orders have been given to shoot them down immediately without any delay. There will be no effort to try and find out the drone's intentions, whether it's hostile or not, whether it's armed or not. All will be treated as hostile intrusions and will be shot down effective immediately. We have also been able to hear outside of that the Polish are still conducting the search for the remaining debris of the drones that violated their airspace several days ago. And we are hearing, actually, that the Polish are appealing for the exercise of particular caution in terms of the public. In the event of noticing unknown objects or their fragments, we ask that you absolutely do not approach, touch, or move the found elements. Among them, there may also be neutralizing agents used or remnants thereof. They may pose a real threat to health and life. So to cut out the the political wordage that the Poles use, they're saying there could be bombs in the debris. Don't touch it. It could blow you up. That's what that meant in real direct terms. I feel like if they put it that way, it would start to convey the danger of messing with the debris. But instead, they said neutralizing agents, like it's some sort of like bleach. But nevertheless, every such situation should be reported immediately to the emergency number 112, the Polish version of 911, or to the nearest Polish police unit. Thanks to your vigilance, the services will be able to quickly and effectively secure the area. So it does appear that the Polish Armed Forces is calling on you, the citizens of the Polish Republic, to make sure that if you find any suspicious debris, report it immediately so that way the Land Inspector General can come forward with his headquarters unit and inspect the situation directly, and to also recover the debris and make sure that no one's killed in the process. Outside of that, we've also been able to hear inside of Poland that the Ukrainians have appeared, which is a little bit crazy because, as many of y'all will know, Poland and Ukraine I've had a pretty one-sided relationship through most of the war. It's mutual, of course, but at the same time, Poland has been the one that has been going head over heels to help out the Ukrainians along with the rest of the Western world, providing an air corridor in Rezhal for everyone in the West to be able to send their military equipment into Ukraine with, and not only that, the Poles have provided a large amount of military equipment in support of Ukraine itself. But the Ukrainians have never really returned the favor because they haven't had a way to. But recently, after this drone incursion, the Ukrainians are showing that they do say thank you in a way that counts more than ever than just saying the words thank you. They are actually offering the Polish a massive amount of training that will be provided by the Ukrainian Armed Forces in drone defensive operations. And according to Zelensky today, he stated that I met with Radoslaw Sikorski, the foreign minister of Poland. You all heard from him yesterday on the stream. We discussed the attack of Russian drones on Poland. Ukraine is ready to share its experience and assist with the training of Polish military personnel. So instead of the Ukrainians going out of Ukraine to train in Poland, now the Ukrainians are going out of Ukraine to train the Polish. Completely different, a total 180, and jointly build a defense system, according to Zelensky. We discussed pressure on Russia, joint defense production, and Ukraine's EU membership. It's very important to open the first negotiating cluster for Ukraine and Moldova with the support of all 27 votes. We also spoke about the SAFE program and the possibility of using funds to produce interceptor drones. So it actually does.
Isn't it kind of interesting now that Ukraine's drone expertise has been shown throughout the entire war, and now we're seeing Russia attack Poland with drones, that now all of a sudden NATO's flipping around a little bit. It used to be that Ukraine was the one that needed all the help. Now NATO is turning around and needing the help back from Ukraine. So it pays off to assist Ukraine because now we can expect a favor in return from them. And obviously Zelensky's obliging the favor by helping Poland teach them basically how to use these drones and how to build them as well. But the U.S. is also going to need that help as well. So while some of the U.S. Leadership were saying, oh, Ukraine's just, taking and they're not giving, well, now we need them desperately because we see how important it is to have a very strong and robust drone infrastructure, and we don't have that right now. So I guess we'll both be telling each other thank you before long.
And it's crazy, folks. It's absolutely crazy. Everyone was saying that we were pouring money into a pit with Ukraine and we get nothing back from it. And now we are going to get everything as far as drone warfare back from them relatively for free. So if you look at it in a sense, America provided $60 billion in military support to Ukraine over the course of about 3 years. So that amounts to about $20 billion a year. So, for about that cost, which is generally a small research and development program here in the United States these days, we have pretty much gotten the key to modern drone warfare in the most effective and deadly way possible for free. Not just for America, but for the whole of NATO. To be honest with y'all, as far as research and development costs go, that's relatively cheap. That's not really that bad, and I would have to say that as far as this turning back to benefit us, it's going to benefit us a great deal, because drone warfare, as we've all seen it, is the future of warfare. Ukraine and the war inside of Ukraine has proved that incredibly clear, because now we're seeing that they've thrown everything on its head. Throughout most of the history of industrialized warfare, artillery has accounted for nearly 70 to 80% of all casualties and fatalities seen on the battlefield and off the battlefield. Now, because of the war in Ukraine, artillery makes up a small percentage, and drones actually are now the artillery of our modern age, making up about 80% of all fatalities and casualties that the Russian Federation has suffered on the battlefield. It is clearly the warfare of the future, and it's great to know that we are going to have pretty much first-hand access to the Ukrainians' abilities to conduct effective drone offense and defensive capabilities, and the Polish will be the first to receive such expertise. Outside of that, we've also been able to hear in Denmark that the Russians are now threatening them, because they have stated that Denmark is helping with military measures for producing fuel for Ukrainian missiles. The Danes have decided that the smartest response is to not sit there and kowtow to the Russians, but to armor up, in a sense, or arm up. And they are now going to be purchasing $9.1 billion worth of SAMP-T air defense systems. This is a Franco-Italian design, something similar to that of the Patriot, but entirely European in its design, origin, and construction, as well as its ammunition provisions. This means
that's kind of interesting. That's kind of interesting they chose to go with that system over an American system. That's kind of interesting there. I don't know why they chose to do that. Do you know why?
I'm a little bit green on this whole thing. I'm so green on it and inexperienced with why they would have done this. You could put me in the field with all the other green people. Call it Greenland, in a sense. But I'd have to say I have no clue, Matthew, why in the world they would ever try and buy the SAMP-T over the Patriot. I just have no clue. It's an enigma to me. But basically, folks,
Honestly, I think the real reason why they're not buying it, and this is just my personal take, I think they're probably not buying the U.S. system because Denmark, like many other European countries, are seeing the U.S. as kind of waffling when it comes to honoring the NATO Defense Alliance, and there's no concrete statements being made by the U.S. that they're going to stand by that treaty. Now, once again, when push comes to shove, maybe the U.S. will pull through with it, but the doubt has been placed out there in the public sphere now, so I think Denmark is choosing this system because they feel it's a safer alternative to the American system, so that way they're not left abandoned, and maybe like Ukraine's having this problem of getting Patriot replenishments from the U.S. That they want a stable supply, basically. So that's why they're going with that, in my personal opinion.
I'll be honest with you. I think it's a little bit different, in my opinion. I think the reason why they're doing that is because the U.S. has threatened to annex Greenland, and they're scared for national security concern reasons. If they buy weapon systems in large amounts that are from the United States, there may be kill switches built into them where they can't even defend their overseas territories like Greenland in a do-or-die sort of a situation like that. So I think that may also be the reason why they went with the SAMP-T instead, because the SAMP-T's missiles are built entirely in Europe, and all of their parts are sourced in Europe, and the air defense systems themselves are based inside of European nations. So for national security reasons, it would be better to go with a weapon system from countries that haven't threatened to annex a significant overseas territory of yours, rather than the United States, which may or may not try and continue those ambitions later on in the coming years. That's what I'm.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that, and once again, it's just my opinion. Like I see people disagreeing with it. Some people are saying it's an availability issue with the Patriot, and it might be different reasons. It could be, but one thing I'm noticing here is it seems to be that not so many countries are so keen on buying American weapons anymore. There's still obviously a lot of people reliant on Western weapons from the U.S., but it looks like if people are given the option, then they're sort of like on the fence about going with American equipment. So it seems like honestly it might be hurting our defense industry a little bit, and which is a very big sector of the U.S. economy. It seems like it might be hurting it a bit by not taking a very strong approach when it comes to our foreign policy. So that's interesting because also our companies rely on selling those pieces of equipment overseas as well as a huge part of their profits. So it seems like it's hurting it.
Yeah, our arms industry or war industry here in America is very heavily oriented to export-based sorts of markets. We sell a lot of weapons around the world. We are actually the largest arms dealer on the planet as far as what we produce and where we sell it. And so doing that, like we've done earlier with the possible annexation of Greenland, at least right now, I would say that it has, in a literal sense, cost U.S. war industries about $9.1 billion in lost potential contracts. Once again, showing us that it's not really a good idea, as far as foreign policy goes and as far as our economy goes in terms of war industry, to possibly make our allies unhappy, because it's not like we are the only arms provider in the world. There are alternatives, and that they feel that their national security is unstable with the United States or is even threatened by the United States. They are going to go spend their money elsewhere, and our arms industries aren't going to serve to benefit, but other competitor arms industries and other countries around the world will stand to benefit from those actions. So it may be a better idea going forward as a lesson learned. We're not going to, try and make it sound like it's like the end of the world. It's not the end of the world, but a lesson learned is to make sure that our allies like us and they're generally happy with the positions we're taking and they're in support of them to an extent, because they will continue to buy our weapon systems, which helps Americans to get jobs, helps these companies to stay afloat, and generally helps us to increase our tax base over time. But nevertheless, moving on from that and outside of the news in Denmark, we have also been able to hear that the French are conducting a little weapons procurement program of their own, but it's not anything that involves a multinational coalition. Oh no, the French are very much against that. They produce their weapons in-house. Very much in-house, I'd say. Oh heavens, incredibly in-house. But before I get to that, I have to touch on a little thing, a little tiny thing that's been going on near to the area of Minsk. We have been able to hear that they are working on an Oreshnik hypersonic missile launching base within the area outside of Minsk, and we've also been able to hear from the Polish Ministry of Defense today that they will be conducting an Oreshnik hypersonic missile test, and they will be conducting the test under the situation that the missile is armed with a nuclear warhead. Whether or not it's actually going to be a live nuclear warhead, we have no clue. Of course, there's probable cause at this point to believe that it may be armed with a nuclear warhead, because they are going to be going through the launching and operation and handling drills as if it was nuclear armed. However, a lot of people have been talking about whether or not they are going to test this weapon system, as the Belarusian Ministry of Defense has heavily alluded to the fact that they will. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so that is what we're hearing right now. We're hearing from different sources that Russia is planning on testing a nuclear-capable Oreshnik, which they have used before on Ukraine. And once again, the Oreshnik is a MIRV-capable missile, meaning a multiple reentry warhead missile, which has multiple different warheads that break off and go into different areas. So we're being told it might actually be tested in the coming weeks, or maybe in the coming week or so. So is it going to happen? And it looks like 35% said yes, they will test it, while 30% said it's a 50-50 chance of it, and 26% said no, they will not test it. So my only question would be, where are they planning on having this thing touch down? Because if they're going to test it in Belarus, then where are they going to fire it to? Like, that's the question. I'm really not sure where they would do that. Maybe into an empty field somewhere, possibly. I'm not really sure. But I have a feeling, though, that considering how hostile Russia is right now and how large these deployments are in Belarus, they might be planning to test the Oreshnik. But once again, it's not going to be nuclear armed, I don't believe. That would be crazy. So if they nuclear armed the thing and they sent it somewhere, that would be obviously extremely concerning to the West, to the point where we'd probably freak out to a degree at that point. So it'll probably be unarmed like it was when it was used inside of Ukraine on different cities there. But if they test it, though, that's still going to be a bit concerning. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that they have a decent chance of testing it. I would be with the 36%. As far as it actually being nuclear armed, that's highly unlikely. They are going to be going through the operational procedures, handling and firing the missile as if it was armed with a nuclear warhead, which leads us to say that there is a statistical probability it may be armed with a nuclear warhead. But at the same time, that would be absolutely stupid to arm the thing with a nuclear warhead, and on top of that, that would be incredibly dangerous, because what if the missile fails? And then the nuclear weapon is armed. That could pose some issues for some major Belarusian city that may be around the flight path, maybe. So I would generally say that it's most likely not going to be nuclear armed. That's highly unlikely, but they will most likely test the Oreshnik hypersonic missile, as these military exercises are supposed to always be a show of force by the Russian Federation and the CSTO, which is their version of NATO. So it would make sense they would conduct this sort of a test during the military exercise. So with that,
And also, it seems like they'd want to test it because the Oreshnik has gotten a very bad reputation for being unreliable. We have heard over the past month or 2 months, actually, that Russia allegedly tried to launch another Oreshnik somewhere at Ukraine. And we were told, and this is unverified, so take it with a grain of salt, but we've heard rumors that they tried to launch it and it failed before it even took off. So the Oreshnik does not have a good history. It has a history of being very poorly developed and also not a very good reliability record either. So Russia might want to try to basically have another shot at it here and try to prove to the West that, okay, this crappy missile that we've developed actually is working, and we'll show you during Zapad 2025. That might be what they're trying to do as well, just to simply clear the record that it actually does work at least some of the time.
Yeah, that's what I would agree with. It most likely will be to show they finally work, but knowing how the Russians do that, it probably wouldn't work, and then it'd end up being an embarrassment, because I still have not heard, folks, of them actually test firing that supposedly nuclear-powered cruise missile. They still haven't tested that thing. Apparently, it's run into a myriad of issues, and they've completely sidelined it from being tested, at least for now. Because we haven't heard squat about the thing. I haven't been able to get y'all any information on that because they're giving no information on it, and if it was even a success. And if the Russians ever omit to give information anything, one of two things has happened. Either the whole project was sidelined for now because of significant failures before the launch even occurred, or the launch occurred, it failed instantly, and so they covered it up and didn't want to talk about it. It's one of those two things. That's what they would have done during the Soviet Union, and that's what the Russian Federation does today, without doubt. But
you got to remember, they're running out of money too. Like Russia's budget budget is being spread so thin right now. They're having to take out of civilian infrastructure to try to put it toward the military just to simply replenish the ammunition stocks and also to keep manufacturing all these Shahed drones. So they really don't have the money to spare for development. And obviously developing things like nuclear-powered cruise missiles and also developing things like, for example, trying to make the Oreshnik, that junkyard missile, actually work, that all takes money. So that's something they don't have right now. They're a little bit short on that, and I don't think they're ever going to find it. So, maybe they're getting help from somewhere to maybe fund the operations, but I would personally doubt it.
I would have to say that I personally doubt that as well heavily, and I think that if they try and launch it, it might fail, and that's going to be absolutely hilarious, to be honest with you. Hopefully it doesn't have a nuclear warhead on board when it fails. That will cause a radiological incident within a limited area in Belarus, but it is going to be hilarious when the thing does fail if they do test it. Outside of that, however, the French don't test nuclear weapons. They make nuclear weapons, and I know that many of y'all have heard of many amazing French car companies. Matthew, have you ever heard of a famous French car company?
Renault?
Renault's one of them. How about a luxury sports car brand?
Out of where? France?
Yeah, France.
Bugatti?
Yeah, Bugatti. The French, they have a knack for nice things, good food, nice architecture, nice cars, nice stuff. They know good things when they see them. The French have a specific peculiarity when it comes to taste, and they're very good at it. And so the French have decided in their modern ambitions and knowledge that it would be a good idea, a tasteful idea, to update their nuclear arsenal, and so they're now adopting a brand new ICBM that's going to be deadlier and more effective than any other that's come before. This is the one that they had beforehand. This looks like a Chanel lipstick, but what it really does is it turns your enemies into a Chanel lipstick smear on the pavement inside of Russia. They're going to be introducing a brand new one of these things called the M51.4. This one's going to be even deadlier than the last, and it's going to be replacing the M51.3, which already had a range of 9,000 kilometers, a full-on intercontinental ballistic missile by every measure, and could carry up to 6 warheads on a MIRV. So this new one, we haven't been able to hear any new specifications of it or what it'll be able to do, but it is expected that it'll be longer range and might be able to carry an additional warhead on its MIRV. So in general, it's going to be more effective, more deadly, and also longer range. But we also have breaking news coming out at this moment. And Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so we are going to have to interrupt our news coverage here of the events of the day to cover something that's happening right this second. We have heard another mega earthquake has struck the coast of Russia, apparently right this minute. We're seeing a 7.7 magnitude earthquake has struck right on the coast, and we do have a map here, Enforcer, of where this exactly is right here. But to read you the announcement, it says a tsunami threat exists for parts of the Pacific located closer to the earthquake. It's still too early to determine whether there is a possible tsunami threat to Hawaii yet, but if there is a tsunami threat to Hawaii, the earliest estimated time the hazard might begin is 10:36 p.m. Friday the 12th, which is today. So it looks like very little is known about what this is going to result in when it comes to the tsunami threat, so take that all with a grain of salt right now. We're waiting for more information, but show us this location, Enforcer. Where is this in location to the coast of Russia? Because I really can't see it from my end.
Oh, look like that. Look like that. So this appears to be right.
Is this the same
here.
place as last time? Around the same place?
Oh, let's see. The last time it happened. Let's see here. Let me. No, this actually is a little different because last time the earthquake happened around Severokurilsk. Remember, around the Kuril Islands area, sort of down here. This one's occurring right up here. But hey, you know what's great, folks? That damn submarine pin at Vilkovo is right there. It's like it's even closer now.
Man, that's kind of coincidental, isn't it? Another earthquake right there. It's really, though, it's basically in the same spot. Like, it's just a little further north this time. But yeah, it's the same spot. So that is a very highly seismic active area right there. Like, that place is getting hit hard. I can't remember what the magnitude of the last one was, but this one's nearly an 8. This is a big one.
Man, the last one was an 8.8. This one is a 7.7. A little bit more modest. It's still heavy, but it's a little bit more modest. But you know, folks, that tsunami, that tsunami, you know, it's going to be traveling right at Vilkovo. I wonder how they're going to fare with that one this time. I wonder, because last time they did take some damage. This was a little bit closer, and while it's a little bit less intensive, maybe it'll cause a little bit more damage out there. I don't think they can get those subs out to sea quick enough to avoid the tsunami, so we will have to see. But it sounds like it's a Very interesting thing. Very, very interesting thing indeed. Like to hear that. And thank you for sharing that breaking news with us, Matthew. It's
Also,
always
by the way, we'll keep y'all up to date on this, by the way, because last time this happened, we got video coming from that area of the Kuril Islands showing the tsunami wave coming in. So it just happened 5 minutes ago. So we don't have any footage to show yet, but it's basically going to be a repeat of the last time. We're about to see the same thing happening all over again, pretty much. And we're not being told yet what the effects to any United States territories is going to be. So very early, but we'll cover that as it's happening, though, as it's breaking out.
And I'd have to say that we will be making sure to cover that as much as we can while it is coming out, because the tsunami will most likely soon hit, at least at the moment. But moving on from that and out of that news, it is time for us to get on into the rest of the news that we have from around the world, specifically inside of the Ukraine front, the one piece of news we have from the Middle East, and the little bit of news that we have from the Americas. But before we get into all of that major news and also all of the events that have happened in Russia today, I do want to make sure that we get a couple of questions from the chat to take a little bit of a brief moment between the news segments. Also, folks, I gotta say, once again, I'm absolutely astonished and blown away by how many people are here at the moment and also how many people subscribed. We have officially surpassed the 494,000 subscriber mark, and we are on our way to 500,000 at this point. I gotta say that we're entirely honored and appreciative that 16.5 thousand people are here at the moment, and 82,000 people have watched this stream in its opening hour. If you are new to the channel and you've been enjoying it, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We cover this news every single day, 6 days a week, except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, every day like clockwork, and we cover all of the major events that have happened around the world in terms of global news. So if you're enjoying this show tonight, please make sure to subscribe. It's the same quality and same show every single night, and we also make short war videos whenever we can to make sure that y'all know all of the news, even the things that have happened in the middle of the day, at least relative to our time. But nevertheless, before we get on into the rest of this news and the rest of the news that so many people have been enjoying tonight, I do want to make sure that we get a couple of questions. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat of the night, this one is going to go to none other than Howard Mendelson. And thank you very much, Howard, for that $118 support right there. And we do generously appreciate that right there. That's very generous of you. And Howard said, in loving memory of Marie LSA, a channel legend who was sweet to everybody all the time, and we will miss her. And also, by the way, Howard, very, very sad news right there. I'm not sure, because I personally haven't heard directly any confirmation of anything, but Marie has been missing for a very long time, which has gotten a lot of people very concerned with that. So, I would like to hear exactly where that came from, because I would like to know exactly what the case is with that. But it's very unfortunate news indeed. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I haven't been able to hear individual confirmation of that either. But if you are hearing of that, Howard Mendelson, before we have, I would have to say that is incredibly unfortunate to hear. Of course, we have lost viewers in the past, and I can never forget CME4PC, who was a longtime viewer, an old guard, as a matter of fact, and one of the first people that we had ever heard of that had passed away in the time that we've been covering the news on this channel. And that's always stuck with me. I will always remember CME4PC. That was years ago at this point, but it's always stuck with me, and it's always been a sad thing. I would have to say, hopefully, like generally, unless if we get a confirmation ourselves from someone that was close to Marie LSA that she died, I like to be a little bit positive, because it really, like, to be honest, it actually brings me down to hear that folks who've been around with the channel for a long time have passed. So I like to think of it more so that they're just taking a little break from the channel, and they'll hopefully be back soon. But of course, the reality is most likely different. She most likely has passed away. We knew that she was in bad health before the last time we saw her. So it's an incredibly unfortunate thing to think about. I hope that that's not the case. I hope that she might still be just missing in action. That's what I personally like to think. But still, it's always sad to hear about that sort of a thing. A lot of people have unfortunately passed away, at least recently, and it's always a sad thing every single time. But I do thank you for the support, Howard Mendelson, and helping this channel to keep on running and making this thing possible. Because I know that Marie LSA, CME4PC, and so many other people who have come and gone on the channel, people who have been here, people who have passed away, some people who have just gotten tired of hearing about war and everything going around the world and can't take it anymore, have come and gone, and it's always a sad thing to think about. And it really is a terrible thing. I hate to hear about it, but I would still like to say I'm going to be a little optimistic and just say that Marie LSA is taking a break from the channel. We at least haven't gotten official confirmation, at least yet. So I like to be optimistic, but it always brings me down whenever I hear about that sort of stuff. But a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. So, also, excuse me, by the way, still trying to get some more information here about this earthquake that's happening right now. I am seeing certain people say that there may be a tsunami threat from this, but right now it's hard to tell. I would say, though, with this earthquake epicenter happening literally right off the coast near the Kuril Islands once again, there probably will be a similar incident, at least in my layman's opinion, around that same area right there. We saw some pretty dramatic effects happening near those Kuril Islands right there, so we might see the same thing this time, but still monitoring for more information about that. But jumping into our next one here, this one goes to the Martian, and he puts in a $100 donation. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support as well. Very generous. He said, "You guys are doing great and keep up the good work. And when is the move? And also say hi to the Saints, LOL." And I can't understand how Putin is doing this war. They're broke and headed towards Stalin-type tactics. And God bless our republic and Slava Ukraine and LSA.
And thank you so much for the massive support, The Martian. I got to say that I thank you so much for wanting us to keep up the good work and saying that we're doing great. We try our best every night, and I hope that tonight has been a good night again. But beyond that, I would have to say that I really do not understand what Putin is doing in the war either. At this point, it's become nonsensical. And I always find it funny when people still say that Putin is some sort of a mastermind, because we've been watching him for 3.5 years. It's almost 4 now. And a lot of the stuff he does just doesn't make any sense at all. It's incomprehensible. None of it has a general plan or a theory, or if it does, it's poorly planned and just has no real structure to it. It's really lame stuff. But beyond that, I would have to say they really are starting to head towards that sort of a direction with the Stalin-era tactics. Honestly, at this point, I think he's trying to outdo Stalin, because Stalin really didn't have nuclear weapons for the most of the time that he was in charge. He really only had a few of them in his last years. But Putin actually has access to nuclear weapons, so he might actually end up outdoing Stalin if he's crazy and stupid enough, which he might actually be. But I do have to say a big thanks to you so much once again, and of course, God bless the Republic. As I say, long live the Republic, and of course, Slava Ukrainian, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, before we move on, I actually saw Rob Eisman in the chat just earlier say that Marie LSA most likely has passed. And generally, folks, I'd like to say that I think it'd be a little bit more poetic in a sense, and make it less sad if we say that they took a break from the channel. Maybe an infinite break from the channel, but I hate to think about that sort of stuff. We just got done talking a few days ago, well, actually it was just yesterday, about the assassination that happened in Norham, Utah, and I've got to be honest with y'all, regardless of whether we really get to talk to a lot of y'all or not, if we see y'all's names in the chat a lot, and then we hear of someone going missing, and then we later hear that they died, like CME4PC, it really makes me sad. Like, I don't really say it a lot, but it gets me incredibly sad. So I like to think a little bit more optimistically and just say that they're taking a long-term break from the show, because it's something that doesn't really make me it's sad, but it's something I don't like to think about, is that folks, found a lot of enjoyment in the channel, and they're no longer around for us to get to chit-chat with them or say hello to them, at least every time they're here. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so our last one here is going to go to Rick Galenchin, and thank you very much, Rick, for that support, by the way, a $50 support all the way from Canada, and we do appreciate that. And Rick said, "Greetings from Vancouver, and a coffee and donut fund contribution, and take one from the chat."
And thank you so much for the support, Rick Lynch, all the way from Vancouver, Canada, a really cool place in British Columbia. And I gotta say, British Columbia is a really cool name. I like British Columbia. I think it's neat. Also, honestly, a lot of the Canadian province names are really cool, like Yukon, and Alberta and Saskatchewan. I always thought that the Canadian provincial names were really cool. But beyond that, I do have to thank you massively for the support, Rick Galenchin, and I have to thank you for the coffee and donut fund. Oh, by the way, Rick Galenchin, since I am a trained person, I have to tell you all about something that we actually saw a little while ago that has to relate to Canada. You already know where I'm going with this, Matthew, but let me go show you all this. I thought this one was really cool, and I'd never heard of it really a lot or seen it much. And I never really cared about it because I thought it would never come through our area. But we actually got to see this, and I was like, oh my god, it is the coolest thing ever. It's Canadian Pacific 7015. Look at it. It's an SD-70 that has a heritage paint scheme on it of, I think it's an F unit from the older days of the Canadian. Actually, yeah, you can see it right there behind 7015, right there, the older F7s that did carry that paint job. And it actually came through Birmingham a couple of weeks ago. We were very lucky to catch it. I think it was a miracle that we caught it, honestly, because we didn't even know it was coming through. But I actually snapped some pictures of it. It was super neat. And I believe the Canadian Pacific's trackage actually goes all the way out there to Vancouver, Canada, if I'm not mistaken. So actually it's Canadian Pacific, Kansas City now, but back in the day it used to be Canadian Pacific, and look at that, it actually goes out there to Vancouver, where you are. So we actually got to see one of your trains come through. We actually see a decent amount of Canadian Pacific Kansas City trains coming through here, or old KCS and Canadian Pacific or CP trains come through. They're really cool. I like them. And also I like the red paint job of the Canadian Pacific. It's a pretty cool one. But anyways,
Yeah, those are neat. Also, by the way, let's see here. I was trying to get some more information from the USGS, the U.S. Geological Survey, to find out more information about this earthquake, by the way. Right now, it does appear a tsunami threat has been issued, but once again, it's not a watch or a warning. It's just a threat warning. So we don't see a confirmed major tsunami threat yet, but it has been at least flagged right now near Kamchatka. So Kamchatka was the same area that got hit really heavily last time around that area near the Kuril Islands. So that is currently what we're looking at right this second. But it looks like the depth is 6 miles, according to what we're seeing right here. So I'm not sure if that's a placeholder, if that's actually the depth of the earthquake itself. But that's what we're hearing right now. So waiting on some more information about that right now.
And if considering that it just happened, it's most likely a placeholder that it happened 6 miles down. It probably happened somewhere else, I would assume, but we might be wrong. I might be wrong on that at least. So we'll have to see. But that still is interesting to hear, and it happened really close to land, from what we can tell. So that's even crazier. I bet you the damage is going to be significant at Volkovo. But with that, I hope we've addressed those questions well.
We got some video. We got some video right now, by the way, actually, of this thing. We got the shaking on camera. So go check this out. It's a top post on our Twitter page, by the way. This is our first piece of footage that we have coming out of Kamchatka right now.
Let's take a look at it. Oh, someone's got tuberculosis.
That doesn't seem that heavy for a 7.5.
I think that might have been like a pre-tremor, like right before the earthquake, or an after tremor maybe, because that is really light.
Yeah, it is light. I mean, maybe it is. I'm not really sure. It's just so early, and that's our first piece of footage so far. So, yeah, so it seems pretty light if that's all it is.
Let's see. Kamchatka Peninsula. Well, this actually could be anywhere, because the Kamchatka Peninsula is quite sizable. In length, it is about 715 miles long. So this could have been anywhere in the Kamchatka Peninsula. So the earthquake happened down here, and this could have been filmed in Ust-Kamchatsk, 300 miles away, maybe. So really hard to say. Like, we don't know exactly where that came out of in the Kamchatka Peninsula, but we do have proof that the earthquake did happen at this point. We have video and picture evidence, the golden rule, so we can confirm that this earthquake is having direct impact on the Kamchatka Peninsula, at least at this moment. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, and it is time for us to get through the rest of the news. And moving on from that and into the rest of the news that we have for the night, we have been able to hear, moving into the United States for a brief moment, that the United States is continuing to test the B-21 Raider out there at Edwards Air Force Base. Look at that little UFO critter go. Look at it. It's a beautiful plane, actually. I really like these, and I think that the windows, the window panes on the cockpit are really futuristic. I just think it's really neat.
It's really crazy to think that the original version of this, the B-2 bomber, it's actually so old at this point. I just came across a picture today of the B-2 bomber flying over the World Trade Centers, like back in July of 2000. So that thing has been around for so long. It's now, obviously, it's 2025 now, and that thing was in development and actually flying even before that. So quite crazy. It's been a long time since they've had a successor to the B-2.
Let me see if I can find you one of the first pictures ever published of the B-2 back in the day. I think this would be one of them. And this is, you can tell this was a long time ago because of how the camera took the film.
Yeah, it's very old right there. Have you seen the footage of that thing, the B-2 flying over the World Trade Center, by the way?
I actually don't think I have, actually.
Punch that in real quick, because I just saw that picture for the first time yesterday. I was like, wow, I didn't know that flew over the World Trade Center like that, like the old ones. So it should, yeah, there it is right there. Look, it was flying right over the World Trade Centers.
That's actually pretty wild looking. I'm not gonna lie, it kind of looks photoshopped.
That was actually real, though. I don't think it's photoshopped. I think it's legit.
Yeah, it's real. Apparently in July of 2000. But that is so crazy. Also, it's
This
interesting.
this happened literally 12 days before I was born, actually.
Wow, that's actually really cool. I did not even know about this. This is incredibly neat. Folks, I actually have some old stuff that was given to me by teachers in elementary school that had like New York's. It said New York City. It was a poster of New York City, and the main thing that it was a picture of in the poster was the World Trade Centers. It was made before 9/11, so pretty cool stuff. Unfortunate what happened on 9/11, but that is really cool to see a B-2 fly over that thing. Like that looks so unreal. Really, I really don't know how to take it, but anyways, this B-21 though, this thing is the cat's meow. It technically, folks, is actually smaller than the B-2, and it's made as a more tactical bomber than a strategic bomber, just as far as its mission role and mission statement has been made public, but it still is really cool. I like these things. I think that they definitely have a future in the U.S. Air Force, and I just got to say, I really like that gray paint scheme that they have. I think it's really cool compared to usually most of the dark gray or black paint schemes that we get on stealth aircraft.
Yeah, I would say so. I think this is a very cool looking aircraft. But right now, there's only two prototypes, actually. That's what we're being told, at least. Just two of them. So that's one of two right there you're seeing. So it's a bespoke aircraft, I guess you could say.
It is a artisan aircraft. It is made in limited numbers.
Expensive.
Although they will be making hundreds of these, though. I've heard that they have plans for, I think, 200 of them. So this will be the most numerous strategic/tactical bomber that we'll have in the Air Force after this thing completes its contract run.
Indeed.
Indeed, I say. We've also been hearing that the U.S. has been conducting continuous surveillance against Venezuela down in the Eastern Caribbean. We were able to see a KC-135 and a P-8 Poseidon down there earlier today. In the meantime, in Washington, D.C., we were also able to hear that the ballroom's being completed on the White House, and also, apparently, according to the president, patience is running out with Putin. We'll have to see where that goes in 2 weeks. We've also been able to hear that there is a plan, a mechanism, or as we're calling it here on the channel, the mech, that the U.S. is calling on the G7 countries to create a mechanism to confiscate $300 billion worth in frozen Russian assets. According to the agency, the United States proposes not only to use the profits from these funds, but to also use the assets themselves to finance Ukraine's defense. Most of them are stored in Europe. I find it a little interesting, though, that this is primarily just to give the U.S. money, and then Ukraine's kind of a side note. You would think that Ukraine would be the main note of this, considering that the assets were frozen because of the war in Ukraine. But in addition, the U.S. insists on introducing secondary duties of 50 to 100% against China and India for the purchase of Russian oil, as well as on trade restrictions, in order to block Russia's access to energy and dual-use technologies. So it does appear that the United States is moving forward with the mech. Moving on out of that, and out of the United States in general and back towards Europe, we'll take a quick pit stop here for a moment inside of the middle of the East, because we've been able to hear something a little bit interesting about the Israeli strikes that happen on Qatar, and more information is coming out further and further about the situation, and I'm going to be honest with y'all, it's painting the situation in a worser light. On Tuesday, 8 F-15 fighters from the Israeli Air Force, along with 4 F-35 stealth aircraft, conducted a flight over the Red Sea, where they released ballistic missiles that traversed Saudi airspace before hitting a site in Doha. Part of the strategy aimed to impair the U.S.'s military capabilities and capacity to spot the assault promptly. Now, this is something that I gotta say, folks, this is something that's starting to get a little bit on the border of the U.S. is going to have to do something about this, because to say this in a small way, the U.S. has about as important a strategic relationship with Qatar as we do with Israel, because Qatar generally serves as a forward operating base for U.S. operations against Iran. So the idea of Israel, just to be entirely honest with y'all, conducting a strike on Qatar, which violates Qatari sovereignty, and also on top of that, doing it in a manner in which it made it pretty much difficult, if not very unlikely, for us to be able to spot the attack or the attempted attack to try and call up the Israeli officials to stop it, is something that doesn't really sit right with me. Because I don't know if many people know this, but it's not Israel that runs the Western Sphere, it's us. So I don't really like the idea of them attacking a fairly important strategic partner in the region that we have a significant relationship with, because they just wanted to, whether or not that's going to screw over our position in the region. I'm all for having allies, and I'm all for supporting Western American interests, but when a country starts to stray out of the path of being in our interests, that's when I start to run into issues with them, like we've done with Turkey. And I'll be entirely honest, the situation with the Israelis, at least in this particular instance, is starting to get me to the point that I'm about to start putting them into the same position that Turkey's in with us, where it's either our way or the highway, at least for them, because it's not really a great thing to see that they are going to more than happily put American strategic interest in jeopardy in the regions. That way they can do a little gotcha, and they even failed at it. They didn't even get the people they were going for. They've just incensed the Qataris, put America in a weird position, and made sure that we didn't even know about it before it was going to happen. That's something that's getting me a little bit unhappy with the Israelis, to be entirely honest with y'all. But anyways, moving on from that, we are also going to be continuing to talk about further developments and news that we've been able to hear outside of the Russian Federation. And there's been a lot today. Oh, buddy, there's been a load. But we have been able to hear of some Russian governmental statements that have been made out of Moscow. First, we were able to hear that the Russian central bank is now bracing for a much wider deficit, as it does appear that the Russians just can't stop the bleeding. They cannot stop the loss of the money flowing out of Russia into the war, and they really can't replace it at any point. So things are spiraling out of control economically in Russia at this point. On top of that, we also...
worse than that. Worse than that is they lowered the key interest rate down from like I think it was like 20-something%. They've lowered it to 17%. I know that's a huge decrease, folks. I know 17% interest, that's a steal. That's a wonderful deal right there. But like seriously speaking, though, that means the Russian economy is slowing down so rapidly that they're trying to spurn purchasing again. When they lower an interest rate, that means you need to try to stimulate the economy and stimulate the consumers to start rebuying things and financing things once again. But the problem is, though, that's not a big enough interest rate drop to spurn the average Russian to buy something. 17% interest, that is still in the gutter, to say the least. So I don't think it's going to help things, but it is a sign, though, that the Russian economy is coming to a dead stop.
Yeah, it does appear that the economy is pretty much dropping dead. Also, before I move on with the situation in Russia, I do see a lot of people talking about the situation in the Middle East I was talking about a second ago. It appears a lot of people were interested in giving their opinions on it, either supporting what I was saying or being a contrarian against it and saying that that wasn't really a good idea. So, really quickly, for people who are saying, well, Hamas shouldn't have been in Qatar, I'd agree, but the problem is that we put them there. Like, that's something a lot of people don't know. We did that as a middleman sort of an agreement that we made between Israel and Hamas in a prior conflict that they had, where we said, okay, how about all of the Hamas leaders pretty much live in exile from the Gaza Strip and they go live in Qatar? And the Qataris said, well, we'll support that. Israel said that was fine. We said that was fine. That's why they went there. That's why all of them pretty much kind of live in exile in Qatar. But I actually looked into that. That's actually the case. That's why they are there. And that's why they're nowhere else, really, in the rest of the world. They pretty much just stay in Qatar living in exile. So we all made an agreement that they would go there. And the Qataris were the ones who said, okay, we'll be fine being the third party, taking these people in. We're not really big fans of them, but we're also not really big haters of them either, but we'll just take them anyways, just to try and preserve peace in the region. And then the Israelis went in the modern day and said, okay, we know that the Qataris, on good faith, on our end and on the U.S.'s end, took those people in to resolve a prior conflict as a compromise, but now we're going to bomb the Qataris. It isn't really something that seems wise, also considering that the U.S. has a decent amount of military bases that we operate out of as forward operating facilities in Qatar. That's also a bit of an issue, because if they piss off the Qataris can expel U.S. forces from Qatar, and we will simply lose access to bases like Al Adid, which are incredibly important in the area. That's something that I'd have to say is not really the greatest move. And I know that a lot of people like to say, oh, well, you know, this and that, the U.S. knew about it. No, it doesn't appear that we did, because it seems as though everyone in the U.S. government is saying that they didn't know about it, they were shocked by it, and as more information is coming out, it's not really painting a picture that would even lead credence to the idea the U.S. knew about it, because generally in the past, whenever the U.S. did know about it, and we feigned ignorance, usually it would come out later through the information we get, we actually did know. This time, it's the opposite. We actually had no clue at all, and we didn't approve this. So I would have to be honest.
The U.S. certainly isn't happy about it. Like, the U.S. is not happy at all about it. The U.S. is not trying to go as far as to, like, publicly call Israel out over this situation, but obviously it's angered them, because the immediate reaction from the U.S. president was they assured Qatar, this will never happen again. That's what they said. This will never happen again. Don't worry about it. We got it under control, which means they're going to deal with Israel in private and get them under control, because honestly, that was very reckless. It put the American base in Qatar, which is the Al Adad Air Base, it put that in risk. Of the Qataris saying, hey, look, we're not going to have y'all here if you're going to let your allies start bombing us. We're not going to let that happen. And they could do that. Like, that's a real possibility. If Qatar gets upset enough with us, they could decide to say, hey, you're going to have to get the hell out of here. Like, we're not going to have that. And we can't afford that because Al Udeid is the biggest base we have in the region. So, it was reckless. It really was. So hopefully Israel backs off, because that's not a wise thing to do, to start compromising our bases.
And also on top of that, I don't I see a lot of people saying, well, Qatar is just a terrorist hellhole. Okay, so if they were, why did Iran shoot at them previously to get at us? And also, why did Qatar get involved with their own armed forces in shooting down those missiles that were fired at them? If they were more than happy to support terrorists, which are generally anti-American, why the hell would they have ever fired off a shot in defense against that Iranian attack that clearly was stated by Iran to be against the U.S. bases in Qatar and not against the Qataris before they even conducted the attack? The folks have to have a little bit of nuance with this. Like I know that a lot of people kind of go with the concept that, if a country in the Middle East is Islamic, it's an enemy, but that's not the case. It's very a nuanced sort of a thing. There are a lot of Islamic countries that are in the region that are our allies, like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and so on, that we have a pretty significant strategic relationship with. And I got to say this as well, for a lot of people who may not know this, Israel is not a strategic linchpin in the area. It's great to have them as an ally, but I also want to make it quite clear, we don't have to have them as an ally. We could easily go with Saudi Arabia or Qatar and then pretty much achieve the exact same kind of strategic ambitions in the region without them. So we are generally an ally with them because we find a common interest in national defense and also in the enemies that we have within the region. But it's not something that we are pretty much lock in step have to do. And I think that it's a little bit important for the Israelis to understand this isn't a laissez-faire sort of a thing where they do whatever they want and we pretty much are fine with it entirely, because they are putting our position in the region in jeopardy. And that's something that, as far as this,
But they can make mistakes, though. Like, no country, no ally is going to be perfect. Like, obviously, this was a mistake on Israel's part. They shouldn't have done this. And also, they knew they shouldn't have done it because they didn't apparently pre-notify the U.S. administration about it. So they knew it was wrong. They did it anyway, and then they wanted to ask for forgiveness after the fact. So, that's one way to do it, but that's a way to piss the United States administration off a lot. So, as long as they stop doing that and they don't repeat that again, Israel is a good ally in the region, because Israel is basically the United States proxy of the region, and it allows us to project force into that region, which we have to have. Is if we don't have it as the United States, China is going to come in there, or Russia is, and they're going to start projecting their own force. We can't have that. So Israel will be our ally, but they can't go overboard, though, with that kind of stuff. They got to chill out, because they can't be putting their interest over our interest and over an unnecessary strike into Qatar. That's just not going to work.
I would have to agree. But moving on from that and out of the region, we are going to be moving back up into Russia and continuing to talk about the statements that the Russians made today about Western involvement inside of Ukraine. As the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Maria Zakharova, stated, nobody wants to send their soldiers as a part of a NATO invasion to Ukraine. That's because they understand what will be done to them. And what will be done to them is a massive increase of ego, because they'll easily defeat the Russian army and they'll come back as heroes. So I don't really think they understand what the real situation is as to why we're not getting involved. We're trying to avoid World War III, but the Russians seem to miss that part a little bit. Outside of that, inside of Russia, we have been able to hear of other strikes and throughout the Russian Federation, including a strike on a field facility near to the city of Ivanovo, which we were able to see in this clip, as a UAV drone came in and slammed directly into the facility.
Damn, son. Looks like you got a good hit.
Сейчас я отправлю, кому там надо.
Easy, a good hit.
Solid, Bliet. Solid. We also were able to hear of another situation that happened around Smolensk, as we were able to hear that the Smolensk nuclear power plant possibly came under some sort of a Ukrainian drone attack. According to Rosatom, which runs the nuclear power plant, they reported that several windows and auxiliary buildings were shattered, but the attack did not affect the plant's operational safety. So it does appear that there was either some sort of falling debris, quite literally this time, or a Ukrainian drone attack that was directed against the power plant, but we're not really sure which one it was. We also were able to get additional information outside of Moscow that an Su-30M SM crashed today near to the Kubinka airfield, and apparently the pilot of the plane is in serious condition but did survive. We have no information on the co-pilot, however. An Su-30 SM always has a co-pilot. Outside of that, we also were able to hear further on up and inside of the area of Primorsk, of a very significant attack that happened today. There are actually two ports inside of the Leningrad Oblast that are significant, and that is the port of Ust-Luga, which you can see right here, which has generally been knocked out of action, and then the one further north of Primorsk. Primorsk is technically around the same size, slightly smaller, but is also significant in its ability to transport crude oil and petroleum, as well as liquefied natural gas, around the rest of the world. And we were able to confirm that today, Primorsk turned into a little bit of a roaring flame. At least the port did, and so we are now going to be christening the port of Primorsk as the port of Primorsk. But we were able to see the information about this strike in great detail from several posts made by the Russians and also made here in the West. In the Leningrad region, drones attacked the largest Russian oil port, Primorsk, in the Baltic Sea at night. As a result of the attack, a fire broke out on one of the ships. There was also a fire at the pumping station in the port. In total, the Russians claimed that they shot down 221 Ukrainian drones in 13 regions overnight, but it doesn't really appear that that was represented, at least in Primorsk. We also were able to see the actual footage of the Primorsk attack here in this clip. You were able to see the smoke rising from the port, and also the sounds of the explosions.
Блять, только хотел снять видео. Где это пиздец происходит?
Yeah, they went on economy, they went on jobs. It happened right over there, you see.
He's like, yeah, you know, it happens.
Не-не-не-не, сюда нельзя.
Не. But here's the next clip.
It seems like a hill rising in the distance, yet. It sounds like the ghost of Prigozhin coming back to haunt the land.
And also, this last clip. Showing all!
The Christmas past coming in the distance, блядь. It's not good for him.
Шойгу!
That took me by That took me by surprise, honestly. I was like, oh, I was like, what? Well, it looks like the port of Primorsk was cooked to a prime finish, really. A great glaze, honestly. Although that's at least what the Russian propagandists have been doing. Not quite, though, because we were able to get a telegram post from one of them, and this is what they stated. According to the sources, at about 4 a.m., the drone crashed on the platform at berth number 8, where the Hong Kong flag tanker Phosphorus was moored, loading diesel fuel. A fire broke out, and loading operations were stopped. Another drone crashed at berth number 2, where the tanker Cayenne, flying the Sierra Leone flag, was moored. A fire and heavy smoke broke out, and terminal employees were evacuated. Another drone hit the Sierra Leone flagged oil tanker Cousteau, setting the tanker on fire, evacuating its 28-person crew, and leaving no casualties. Another drone damaged equipment for accounting and pumping oil in the berthing area number 1, where a fire broke out, as well as an oil storage tank at oil depot number 1. There was no fire in the tank. According to the sources, all technological operations in the port were stopped. There were no victims or injured as a result of the attack. In addition, local residents report that after the attack, traces of an oil spill appeared on the beach in the village of Karasevka and on the shore of the Gulf of Finland. So it does appear that the attack was quite significant, and multiple drones did hit the port. But moving on out of that, we're going to be moving further on down and into the war in... Oh, hang on. Hold up, wait a minute, folks. I just forgot a little snippet from Chechnya. We can't move out of Russia yet. Chechnya is in Russia. We have to get this before we move on into the war itself. Kadyrov is on his way out. It is pretty much confirmed at this point. Nexta has reported that 6 years ago, he was diagnosed with pancreatic necrosis. Since then, he ignored doctors' orders and resorted to self-treatment, which repeatedly led to health crises. In February, doctors installed a nephrostomy, a drainage system to remove urine from the kidneys. While it allows a person to live for years, it requires a gentle lifestyle. Heavy exertion is verboten, and loose clothing is recommended. Exactly how Kadyrov now appears during his rare public outings. In August, Chechen TV showed him moving slowly and with difficulty while inspecting construction sites and schools. In reality, Kadyrov has already stepped back from daily governance. Routine duties have been delegated to his possible successor, Magomed Daudov. Throughout August, the Chechen leader held only one meeting and only one session in office. This is a fairly recent picture of him, and he is looking very bad off.
Is this before or after he almost drowned in Turkey?
I think this is after.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, he's been having a rough go of it. It sucks to be the Chechen warlord right now because he almost drowned in Turkey. They said he went out there to go swimming, and all of a sudden he accidentally drank a little too much water and was nearly dead from that. And then he's also having this medical problem. He's had this medical problem for quite some time now, and it seems to be getting worse and worse. And even, I think even back as far as like 2 years ago, he was having like horrible swelling in the face. He looked like his face was like a basketball. I mean, he's like, this guy's not in good health right here. So Just tough times for this fella. Tough times.
Yeah, it's really tough times for him, but it sounds like he might be on his way out quite soon, and we might see a new quote-unquote president of the Chechen Republic. But outside of that, moving on out of the Russian Federation, it's time for us to get on into the actual news inside of Ukraine. We have loads of combat news that has come out today from the front lines of Ukraine. But before we get into all of the frontline news, I do want to make sure that we tell y'all about the casualty report that came out for the past 24 hours, and it was quite significant. We were able to see that according to Ms. D, keeper of the records, 273 drones is the 17th highest daily loss. Troop average is low in the 900s, but past the 2 days has shown a drop. And it does appear that not a drop has made it to the Russians in terms of usable fuel products, although their losses are somewhat lower than at least it's been over the past several months. Nevertheless, a lot of people are talking, before we get into this casualty report, about the Russians confirming that they paused negotiations on Ukraine with the U.S. and what the dog doing? What is America doing? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so let's get back to the story real quick. Once again, it says Russia has confirmed directly that they have paused negotiations on their end with Ukraine about the, or actually with the United States about Ukraine. So what is the USA doing at this point? Because we're really not taking any action. So what is the plan from the U.S. side now that Russia even confirms the negotiations are pretty much off? So 43% said the USA will do nothing to Russia, while 27% said the USA is just stalling right now for time, and 22% said the USA is planning strong actions. So all we've been hearing, this is all the indications we've gotten so far, is occasionally we hear the U.S. leadership is angry from day to day. They go from being angry to being silent to being angry, not happy, angry, not happy, etc. We also hear that apparently patience is running out. Then the next day we'll hear, okay, well, actually, we're going to try to revive the talks. Oh, that's right, patience is out. Oh, that's right, Putin's being difficult today. Oh, that's right, patience is back out. So it seems like stalling to me. The bottom line is, I think the USA is stalling for time. We're trying to see what's going to happen here, I think. We're trying to see what's going to happen with Zapad and if they're going to start a war with that. And I think we're just stalling for time. So we could put sanctions on the Russians. We should put sanctions on the Russians. We've promised to do that in the past, but the USA has not really followed through with that. And we're also hearing rumors in the background that the USA is going to force the NATO allies to liquidate $300 billion worth of Russian assets to give that to Ukraine to buy weapons. So, there's a lot of things being talked about, but very little action being taken, which is the big problem right now. So I'm on the 27%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be with the 1 second. I'm about to sneeze. I was almost about to sneeze right there, and I was like, dang, I don't think I can mute in time. But outside of that, I would have to say that I would be with the 27% as well. I think that the U.S. is just stalling at the moment. I would have to agree with Matthew for pretty much all the same reasons. I don't really think that we're trying to get anywhere with this, either for the Russians or against them. And we're just trying to prolong the inevitable, at least for now. So I would go with the 27%. But moving on into the casualty report, we were able to hear that over the past 24 hours, 890 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed, along with 2 APCs, 64 supply trucks, 1 main battle tank, 40 artillery pieces, 273 drones, and 2 MLRSs. So it was actually a pretty decent day. Not the highest loss days that we've ever seen, but it still wasn't that bad. Moving on from that and into the active front lines, we were able to see the Petardier crews at work in Vovchansk. If you could even recognize this place as Vovchansk anymore, it is like Stalingrad nowadays, but they did clear out a Russian outpost here. Oh, we're gonna mute that. Oh, whoa. We see them here getting ready to throw in the satchel charge. They're covering the hole. They're running up to the hole, throwing the satchel charge right inside and making a run for it. What happens, folks, when 2 TM62 anti-tank mines are thrown in a hole? Well, this happens. Or this happens. Or that happens. There we go. Right on time. Finally got it.
Oh, dear. Also, I like all the different angles here. This is like a Michael Bay production.
Honestly, yeah. It's like, how do they have this many cameras?
It's like set up for television.
Call it, we got good ratings today. This right here is going to bring the ratings in. I'm telling you what.
We see them bringing... The fuse is actually lit. You can literally see when they light the fuse because it's smoking. Look at that. And so they drop this one off into another Russian position, or a rubble pile, really. It's just sitting there. And off it goes. I gotta tell you, those anti-tank mines pack a punch.
They really do. Those things are crazy powerful.
Man, I'll be honest with you, man. Like many other things, but nevertheless, we also got to see the 3rd Mechanized Brigade also taking out Russian forces within this area, including this D-30. Actually, that's a D-30. You also see them slamming the Russians there. We also see them hitting another D-30. They actually showed a picture of what one looks like normally before they're blown up. And we can see the smoke rising from the impact. Successful hits is what they call them.
It's an old-fashioned term, successful hit. They say the old-fashioned term. They used to call it a hit. But now they call it a Russian loss, a Russian failure. They said, sir, they're failing so much they're getting tired of failing. But I said, that's not the way to do it. That's what jerks do. That's what jerks do. They don't know how to do it. I said, they're losers. They're suckers.
Oh, man, did someone say suck? Moving on from that.
Not talking about that type. I said a sucker.
Not now, hot dog man. Not now.
Real easy. Not that other type. Not that sucking. We don't do all that.
I gotta be honest with you. Some people said, sir, he couldn't suck any harder. And I said, in what way? The hot dog man does it in every single way. It really has no limits. But anyways, we got to see this Mr. S get blown up.
They have a tarp over this thing too, trying to keep it dry.
Man, they're trying to keep it out of the rain, man. They're trying to keep it nice and dry. But moving on from that. Also, by the way, Matthew, I got to ask, did that Indonesian coffee get you jumping?
Yeah.
Man, that Indonesian coffee, man, it had a lot of caffeine in it. I'm still caffeinated. And by the way, folks, we tried some new coffee beans today, and some of them were from Indonesia. First time I ever had Indonesian coffee. I think it was a darker roast, but it was really good. And it also had a load of caffeine in it. So I'm absolutely zooted still. And I had like that coffee hours before the show even started, because we were trying out the new bean. We got some French roast, and we got that Indonesian dark roast. I don't know. I think it's called Sumatra roast, I think is what it is. But it was really good. But
I'm going to try that Colombian next. I'll tell you what.
Yar, he be getting some of that fine Colombian. But anyways, moving on from that, we also were able to hear that the Russians are up again in a pipe dream. They are traveling through the pipe. They've been trying to make their way into Kupiansk through Le Pipe. We've already talked about this about a week ago, but they've actually been able to take some ground around Ridkivka as a result of the pipe. So we'll have to see how the Ukrainians respond to this, because they are now north of Kupiansk as a result of this action and have made ground. Moving on out of that, however, and further on down towards the Severonsky Forest, we also got to see the Ukrainians in the 53rd Brigade taking out some Grodna.
These are flying high, brothers. Ground to sky, earth is ground. Look at that little crappy thing.
Look at that.
Little weak propeller. Look at that.
Man, a little weak.
The lightweight propeller.
Oh, look, that thing's got a whole like ISR pod on the bottom of it. That's kind of crazy. I've never seen that before.
I think that's a conventional Orlan, but it's got like an improved optical system on it.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I've never seen that.
Yeah, me either. Actually, they used to have like the Kodak cameras in them. Remember, like they would like insert them into the fuselage, and they would just face straight down.
Yeah, I remember that too.
Yeah, I mean, that's wild. That's crazy. But moving on from that and on down into the area of the Seversk front, we also get to see Russian forces getting hit in their dugouts down here by the 117th Territorial Defense Forces. We see that in this clip right here. There they are, and there they go. Well, looks like they got them. Moving on out of the Seversk front and further on down towards Prokhorovsk, we were also able to see near Russian Yar, the Ukrainians in the 425th Assault Regiment clearing the town. Take a look. They're about to clear out the Russian flag and put up the old blue and yellow.
Brave man climbing on that rebar like that. That's like the roof's basically like gone at this point. Oh, look, he's telling the story. He's getting it right. You can tell this guy right here, he's the best storyteller.
Man, he's like, you
He's
see,
the best storyteller in the world.
man, this guy says, you see, he climbed up the ladder and then he shook himself and he said, damn it, I need to get out of the army. And he's finished. I tell you, those Russians, they're stupid. And the other guy's like, yeah, you see, I went up to one of them. I said, excuse me, have you ever heard of a toilet? And he said, no, what's that? I said, well, you're about to find out. And then this guy said, so basically they were like, the Russians were like sniveling and crying like a bunch of little bitches. They were like running off into the hills.
They're filming this like it's like an after-action review or something like that, like it's a sitcom. Like they had them all like talk. I really thought what Ivan was saying was really bullshit, but I was having to go along with it the whole time.
Man, honestly. And so we can see the Ukrainians in the 425th actually making their way towards the village. We see them clearing it out, moving from building to building. You can see they were all sitting crying. They were going, please don't hurt us, because they know the 425th means business. And we own that business. That's what he's saying, by the way. I'm translating for y'all. Now they planted the Ukrainian flag on one of the central, I believe this would have been one of the town hall buildings. Now you see this guy with the face blur. I'd say, so yeah, we went in there and we planted the flag. You know, the roof was kind of a little soft, a little bit like almost caving in. But, you know, we did our best. We did our job. You know, what can we do? So now they're all hanging around. Hey, let's get out the Baofeng, baby! And now they're whipping out the Baofengs. They're loading up the smoke grenades. Buckling up. Like I say, honestly, that buckle was kind of tight, though. I didn't really like that shit. It was really annoying. You know, like, I don't know why the hell they can't make it better. And now these guys are like, so, you know, yeah, that belt was really tight and honestly kind of sucked. But we did take the town, though. But I got to be honest with y'all, we got to get a new belt. So now it's cutting back to the Ukrainians back in the town, grabbing the Russian flag. This is, by the way, what they call free toilet paper at the front. We can also see them dropping some ordnance around the area of the Russian flag.
Also, by the way, folks, while we're watching this footage right here, just to bring y'all a quick update on the Kamchatka 7.7 magnitude earthquake right now near Russia. We're currently, it looks like I've gotten a post here from the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency right here. It looks like they are saying, they're acknowledging that the earthquake has occurred off Kamchatka in Russia, and they're saying the tsunami threat exists for parts of the Pacific located closer to the earthquake, but it's still too early to say whether or not there's a possible tsunami threat to Hawaii yet. So we don't know if Hawaii is going to be impacted by it, but we are hearing the Russian authorities are issuing tsunami warnings near Kamchatka, and it looks like a tsunami wave of 1 meter is expected right now. So it's not going to be as severe as the tsunami we saw during the last earthquake in the same area, but it is going to have an impact though. So I'm going to assume that maybe Hawaii won't be impacted, but we're waiting on confirmation from the Hawaii authorities about that.
Interesting. But that does sound like quite the situation once again out in the Pacific. Well, you see here them continuing to talk about the post-battle assessment.
Is there any like volume to this or anything?
There is, but it has music.
I play music.
Yeah,
oh, dang.
so that's why it's muted. That's why I'm having to do like the little dub and just come up with stuff. Because that's what we do. like that's what we do when there's copyrighted audio. But we can see them loading up the mags and dumping them. Oh, a crank! Classy right there. I like that. Also, that recoil control is a little rough, but I'll give it to them. They did clear a town, so it doesn't really matter. Anyways, moving on from that, and on out of that, a little bit of news right there. It's time for us to move on over into the area around Chakov, because we've been able to hear that the Russians have been encircled again! Again! They've been encircled again! So the 7 brigades that were effectively encircled by the 425th Assault Regiment previously have actually started to withdraw from the area, and pretty much the entire northern flank north of Pokrovsk is starting to fold at the moment. But it turns out that in the midst of the retreat, the Ukrainians actually advanced rapidly enough to overwhelm the retreating forces and have now encircled another company's worth of men between Nove Chakov and Chakov. So they have conducted the 3rd encirclement within this area, funnily enough, at this point. So pretty wild stuff. They're doing incredibly well in the northern flank near that area. Unfortunately, we were able to hear that the Ukrainian Su-27 crashed near Doverpilia just a couple of miles back in a bombing operation, and unfortunately, the pilot of the aircraft did die in the crash. Unfortunate thing to hear. It's not an easy or safe job being a Ukrainian pilot in the Air Force, but nevertheless, they continue to provide important and invaluable support to the ground forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in the Battle of Pokrovsk, and it does appear that this pilot paid the ultimate cost to ensure that his nation would continue to have the best chances on the battlefield and would continue to put the Russians at bay. But moving on out of that clip and further on down towards the area of Velika Novosilka, we were also able to see the 65th Ronin destroying a Russian T-72. Oh, and they landed one right on the cope cage. Well, one wasn't good enough. Here comes the second. Maybe a third. Waiter, another FPV, please.
Another hit piece, please. Another one.
Oh, you know one's coming. You know one's coming eventually. Waiter.
I tell you, it's just a terrible thing. Terrible.
I'll be honest with you, like, a hit piece from someone that despicable really doesn't hit that hard anymore. You know, it's like, that's literally bottom of the barrel stuff, like that specific instance. So, anyways, they are absolutely slamming this T-72, and they're finally making it on into the meat of the matter, which is the tank itself. And we see the tank is cooking in that little dugout now. It's like a Dutch oven down there. And that's the end of the clip, but very nice to see. Moving out of the southern front, however, and on up towards Kyiv, it's time for us to get to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. Was there a speech today, folks? Well, there wasn't one on the website. That's why there's not a link. And so I'm desperately looking right now to see if the YouTube channel for the President of Ukraine would have one of his speeches. So let me check this really quickly, folks, just to make sure to do our due diligence here before I tell you all that there was no speech. And it appears that in terms of speeches, there was none. There was a press briefing that happened, but it doesn't appear that there was a speech. The press briefing apparently took up the time that the speech would have. So, with that, folks, that is actually the end of our world news for the day. And I gotta say, folks, what a stream it was. The news took up 2 full hours, and over the course of those 2 hours, 110,000 people have watched this channel. Holy moly! That's a lot of people, folks, and I gotta thank y'all all, once again, for watching tonight, and choosing this channel to be your primary source of news. Not only that, but another several hundred people have joined the channel. We're sitting at 494,260 subscribers. That is a lot of people. That's a load of people. We're getting really close to 500,000 people. And I gotta say that, once again, we are entirely appreciative of all of y'all being here tonight. If you are new and enjoyed the channel, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We cover this kind of news, 6 days a week, every single night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, every day except for Mondays. And we also make short war videos on top of that when there's enough news. So why not? Come on and subscribe to this channel. If you like the news tonight, you will like it every other night. Come on, subscribe. Come on, Jack, do it. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get on into another poll that Matthew has asked all of y'all about Denmark choosing European air defense systems over American air defense systems. And what do y'all think this is about? And Matthew, what are people thinking about it? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so we kind of did discuss this earlier, but I decided to run a poll on it, see what everybody else was thinking as well. The question says, Denmark has chosen to purchase EU air defense systems over the US-made Patriot systems, and why do you think that is? And it looks like 45% said the USA is losing trust in the European sphere, while 36% said availability is the main issue here, and 13% said it seems like a mix of both. And I'll be honest, I think it is a mix of both. I think the Europeans are losing trust in the United States when it comes to honoring the defense agreements. And that's just something that's a natural consequence of appeasement, honestly. So that's personally, in my opinion, what the USA has kind of been doing here over the last couple of months is appeasement, which is not inspiring confidence with our allies in Europe. And honestly, I can't really blame them. So hopefully we get off the appeasement train and more onto the aggressive train when it comes to repelling Russia. But also availability is another issue as well. I saw many people saying that was a problem. Apparently, there is a backlog on the Patriot system. You can't get it this year. So, for example, if a country wants to buy these, like, for example, Denmark, they're going to be waiting at least a year or more, based on what I'm hearing, to get that versus the EU air defense systems, which are available right now. So that's a big factor as well. So it's kind of both. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to actually say that I'm with the 45%. I would generally say that it's a loss of trust by the Europeans as far as the U.S. is concerned, because didn't really do a lot to ingratiate us with the Danish government, that we did seriously consider an attempted annexation of Greenland and still kind of are to a very small degree in the background. That hasn't really done a lot to make the Danes incredibly big fans of buying future American weaponry. And really, to be honest with y'all, we've seen that a lot of European countries have started to buy European instead of American, generally because of a lot of the rhetoric that was made prior in the year by the United States. And some people earlier tried to say that this was political, but the problem is, folks, is that we don't get political on the channel, but when we see that something has a direct action and then a direct correlation or a causation, it's really hard to not overlook that and pretend like that is not the case, at least as far as foreign policy. Those sorts of statements that were made earlier in the year may have cost us tens of billions or hundreds of billions in unrealized war industry contracts that could have heavily benefited this nation's economy, which always needs a little bit of help. A little bit of extra money doesn't hurt. And so when you see someone make statements that start to put a little bit of salt on our allies, or at least salt in their opinions of the U.S. in terms of our allies, and then you start to see that a lot of them start to cancel contracts with the United States, or they start buying from elsewhere when American systems are as good or sometimes a little bit better than the European competition. That kind of leads you to believe that it had to have been because of the statements that were made prior. So that's something that I think a lot of people need to realize, is that there are consequences to actions. Like when a president of the United States says, we're going to annex your overseas territory, and then disses on your whole country, they might not buy your air defense systems later on, like right now. I would generally say that's probably the primary reason why they went with that, because to be honest with y'all, the SAMP-T is a good system, but it isn't as good as the Patriot in terms of the kind of coverage that it can provide. The Patriot is longer range, and also on top of that, having access to U.S. war industry historically has usually been preferred, because U.S. war industry is generally considered to be bulletproof. They will provide if you purchase. European arms industry sometimes can be a little bit slow to react with how European arms procurement generally works. So if they went with that, that's generally showing that it had to have been because of national security concern rather than anything else. So I would have to be with the 45% and say that it generally was probably because of prior statements. And once again, folks, it's not the end of the world. I mean, the Danish will get their air defense. We lost out on a contract. It's not gonna kill off Northrop Grumman or Lockheed Martin or any other defense company like Raytheon that they didn't get that contract. It's not gonna be the end of the world. But at the same time, we always have to be careful, and we always have to observe the situation abroad and make sure that we keep our allies in a decent position. Otherwise, we could end up in a situation like this. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, at least in my opinion. But we always have to be careful about how we step on other people's toes, because it can come back to not really being our benefit in the future like it is right now. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best that I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, before we jump back into our super chat questions here, I do want to cover something real quick, because many people were asking about this earlier today. People were also private messaging me as well about it. They were wanting us to get a little bit deeper into the UAP that was spotted over Yemen last year or late last year. It was shown in Congress, this footage from the U.S. Air Force showing a Hellfire missile being fired at it. So I just wanted to return to that, because I actually promised some people that we would return to that at some point on our stream tonight. So Enforcer, I was actually able to get the source of the video from a congressperson that actually has it to where we can show it here on the stream, so that way we don't have to get copyrighted by one of the major news outlets. So if we want to take a look and examine this real quick, because many people are wanting us to take a look at it, we can do that. It's actually reposted at the very top of our Twitter page right now.
And you know what? Let's take a little look at this thing, because we actually don't know what it is, and nobody actually knows what it is. So here's what we have so far from the specific representative, Eric Burleson. Below is a video I revealed in our oversight UAP hearing today, made available to the public for the first time. On October 30th of 2024, an MQ-9 Reaper allegedly tracking an orb off the coast of Yemen. Green light was given to engage. Missile appears to be ineffective against the target. Footage presented as received from a whistleblower. Independent review is ongoing. So here's the footage that is specifically in question about the unidentified unidentified flying object that was seen around Yemen. So here's the thing. It's fairly luminous. It looks like it's flying over the sea, actually, and it's quite bright. It actually appears to be casting some sort of a light onto the sea surface below.
Also notice they have a target lock on it, by the way. That's also telling as well.
And we see them lasing it. That's what this says right up here. Generally, is that they are lasing it, which means they have a laser designator on this thing to be able to send a weapon right at it and have the weapon hone in on the laser, so that way it'll hit dead onto the target. It doesn't appear to be moving wildly fast, by the way. It looks like it's moving at several hundred miles an hour, so it's not wildly fast. But we see the Hellfire hit it and then just kind of bounce off right
Look
there.
at that. That is crazy. And I can't tell exactly. There appear to be fragments from something there right behind this object that was being tracked. I can't tell if that's maybe parts of the. Also, look at that. It's actually following the object. It's like bits of it are following. That is the weirdest thing. Like, I don't even know how to really explain that. Like, it looked like parts or fragments from the object broke off as a result of the Hellfire hitting it. But the Hellfire didn't explode it. It just bounced off of it and flew away. But this object kept going right there, which is, baffling.
Well, it's skimming the sea surface. And that's interesting, because that would generally suggest something like an anti-ship missile normally. But what's weird about that is that we don't really see a missile. We just see some sort of a light or an orb of a sort of light, and that's it. But it does hit. And when it does hit, it actually does affect the trajectory of this thing, whatever this is. I would also have to say, folks, that considering that it hit, the Hellfire does have an explosive on board, and considering that it doesn't appear to have exploded, this Hellfire may have been a dud. Like, it may have just hit and bounced off without exploding, and that may be the reason why this thing was not taken out, is that the Hellfire may have been a dud. But it hits, bounce off. It does affect the trajectory of the object. It appears that some pieces also fall off of this object, whatever the thing may be. But it continues.
Also, notice as well when it started actually rotating as well, as you could see some of the geometry of it when it started rotating. It does not appear to be a spherical object. It appears to have edges to it. If it starts turning like that, you can see the edges as it starts turning. Look at that. You can see it. It's not a perfectly round object, whatever this thing is. So, and also people were saying a Mylar balloon. This thing is moving at speed. So I don't know. Like, and also, how would a Mylar balloon react like that? It reacted like it hit a rock. Like it looked like the Hellfire hit a solid object. When it hit it, and then it bounced and went a different trajectory. So I don't know. Like, to me, it seems solid. It seems like it's moving with propulsion behind it. It's moving pretty fast. So I don't know. That just seems weird.
Yeah, it's rather weird. I don't really know what to make of this. But it hit kind of towards the back of the thing, and then it bounced off, and then it sent this thing hurtling for a minute. And it appears to have some sort of an oblong shape, whatever this thing is. But pieces fell off.
I see some people saying it's a plastic bag or something. This would be the first jet-powered or like propulsed plastic bag I've ever seen. This thing would not be moving at this speed with this type of momentum behind it as a plastic bag. It would be catching too much air if it was a plastic bag. So this thing clearly, to me, has some sort of propulsion. Like, look, it's still going. Like, the thing's still going.
Well, also look at the speed at which this thing is passing over the sea state below. I mean, this thing is moving pretty fast. Plastic bags don't move like that. Like, if you've ever seen a plastic bag in the wind, they maybe move at a few miles per hour, but not like this. This is about the speed. This would be about 300 miles an hour, I'd assume. A little more or a little less than that, but it's moving quickly.
And also, it appears to be possibly changing direction, too. Like, it seems like it's kind of curving off to the right a little bit.
Actually, it doesn't appear that it's emanating any kind of light. That might just be the person filming this, and there was like a glare on the screen. Because when it moves away from center screen, it doesn't appear to be emanating any kind of light. So, still, it's a little bit odd to say what this thing is. I really have no clue, folks. And I know a lot of people like to get into the idea it's aliens or something. But, I mean, if this was a Hellfire that hit it, right there, this thing is no larger than a Hellfire, it seems. Also, by the way, I do have to say this as well. The Hellfire really isn't defined incredibly well at all on this infrared or this camera. So this may be something a lot more mundane than what we're thinking, and it's just that this camera doesn't really pick it up too well, because it really didn't pick up the Hellfire well. And if you just saw the Hellfire on the camera, it kind of looks like the object, but smaller.
Yeah, I don't understand. And also, it's like this is happening off the coast of Yemen, allegedly, according to what we know. So it's like, I don't understand. Like some people are saying maybe it's some type of high technology that the U.S. possesses or something, or maybe like China possesses and they're testing it. Why would you choose to test it off the coast of Yemen? Because Yemen is a hotbed of terror activity. So it's not like a safe space to go, test high-tech weaponry. The Houthis could try to shoot this thing down. And also the U.S. tried to shoot it down with a Hellfire. So, obviously nobody can identify it. Why the hell would you shoot something? And also, why are we shooting something we can't identify? It's like, this could be an aircraft, but yet we're shooting at the thing. So someone made the conscious decision in the military to take a shot at it and see what would happen because they were so perplexed by it. They wanted to simply see how it would react. So, quite interesting.
I would have to say it had to have shown up on a radar somewhere. I would bet you money, man, that there was an AWACS operator on a Greyhound or on a carrier or on the destroyers that saw this thing. They probably declared it a vampire, which means that it's some sort of an anti-ship missile because it's skimming. I mean, look at this thing. It's not that far up off of the sea floor. It's maybe like 50 feet off of it. Well, not the sea floor, but the surface state of the ocean, which is the surface of the sea. It's not that far off of it, so it's a skimmer. So it looks like an anti-ship missile. It would show up like one on a radar cross section. So they would declare a vampire, which means that it's an incoming anti-ship missile. They prepare to engage, and then they most likely send out this whatever it is. It's a Reaper or some kind, maybe, to try and hit it with a Hellfire. And so then they hit it. The Hellfire didn't explode, but this thing also tumbled and then pretty much continued on perfectly fine. So a little bit.
And that tells you it's not a cruise missile or something like that. Like it's not an armament that we're familiar with, because what cruise missile gets hit by a Hellfire, rotates 180 degrees, and keeps its momentum in a straight line? Like, I've never seen any type of cruise missile that we possess or any type of weaponry that can do that. Usually, if something gets hit by an opposing force from a side angle like that, it's like if a car gets T-boned, the car is going to change trajectory to wherever it got T-boned from. So it's going to go the opposite direction. So how come this thing got hit from the side and it kept going in a straight trajectory with full momentum behind it? It seems weird.
Yeah, it's a little weird. And once again, watching this again, it impacts, and this thing tumbles. The Hellfire goes dipping into the sea. We don't get to see where it really goes, but it does go dipping into the sea because the sea is right below this thing. But also, one thing that's interesting is that the fragments really don't lose momentum either. And that's one thing that's incredibly interesting about it. Look, it hits, and then you would think that afterwards, because, kinetic energy and all, that those fragments aren't really a part of the propulsion system, whatever it is, any longer. They're not being carried along. So you think that these things would drop back pretty quick. But no, they kind of hang out with the oblong object at the same speed nearly, which is quite interesting. Because we've all seen.
It's also weird. It's also weird as well. You notice that it lost the target lock once it got hit by the Hellfire and it bounced off of it. They lost the target lock on the object once the little multiple fragments cut off the main object, which is kind of weird. They can't get a target lock there either. Notice that they're not locked onto the object anymore.
They may have chosen at this point not to be locked on. Maybe it's not like it's impervious to locking on. This thing locks on to like an image, so it's not like it could stop the system from doing that. But it is weird. Also, when I say it locks onto an image, it's a really complex sort of a thing. This thing has kind of like sort of like a protoplasmic AI inside of it, where if it sees something and you lock onto it, it kind of like takes a picture or a snapshot of the object, and it is able to auto track it. So if it got hit, the little fragments may have confused the targeting system for a second, and it may have, the targeting system may have gone, what the hell's that? I don't know which one's the object I'm supposed to track, so it just stopped tracking. And then after that, they probably decided not to last it up again, because they were like, oh, well, it missed. So they were probably trying to figure out what to do at that point. So they could have lasted up again for sure, because it would have just taken a picture of the thing again and auto-locked it, as it would normally due to its software and how the system works. But very interesting. Also, by the way, I'm not really one, folks, for surmising incredibly strange things of the occult, like, it's a demon or a UFO or it's aliens. I don't really know what it is, but it is quite peculiar, that I will say.
Yeah, if it was something that would, let's say, like by hypothetical, it is some type of high technology the U.S. has developed and we're testing off the coast of Yemen, it's very possible that, because once again, the way these projects work, these special access projects, is only the people that are involved with it on a need-to-know basis are read into these projects. So the entire military is not made aware of our secret technology. It's not the case. That would go against compartmentalization. It would defeat the whole purpose of having special access programs. So it's totally possible that these individuals operating the drone are not read into a certain top secret project, and this could be a testing of some sort of aircraft that the US is developing, and they're not aware of it. And they could have shot a Hellfire at it, not knowing that either. So that's possible as well. But one thing we do know, though, this right here, this object is being tracked, and matches the same profile that's been spotted by other Air Force pilots. We've seen about a year ago more footage come out from an Air Force fighter jet showing a similar shaped object flying along that was called the Orb, and it changed direction rapidly. It also did things that normal aircraft can't do. So this is not the first time the Air Force has seen objects like these, but it is the first time that I've known of that we fired a Hellfire at it.
Yeah, and it appears to have just kind of, well, the Hellfire didn't explode. We don't know what would have happened if the thing would have exploded, but it appears to just kind of shrugged off the dud and just kept going, to a degree. Damn,
I'm sorry, it's just so weird. Also, dang, bless you.
Thank you.
Dang, it's just so weird. Like, I just don't even know how to like say it. Also, I'm not one that's like adverse to conspiracy theories. Like, sometimes conspiracy theories turn out to be true. I don't say that every conspiracy theory is just like bogus. Like, there are some with some truth to it, but I'm also not one to believe like, oh, it's aliens right here. Because here's the thing, folks. Why are aliens hanging out off the coast of Yemen? Like, like just from a common sense standpoint, why are they flying around the coast of Yemen out here just randomly? It's like that's the worst place they could go.
The aliens living on the sea floor, they're like, man, can't have shit in Detroit. The Yemeni Houthis just stole my front stairs. Like, bro, it's like, this would be the worst place to live if you're an alien living on the bottom of the ocean for some reason, is around Yemen. Worst place imaginable.
Bro,
and a giant container ship could fall on your head because the Yemenis blew it up right above you. Like, they wouldn't be here. Like, I can promise y'all that.
Man, I tell you, it's like the aliens chose to like drive down the wrong side of the block or the wrong side of the hood or something, because this is a bad place. This is the bad side of town right here. So I don't know why they'd be flying around here. I just don't buy into that, folks. Like, if it's there's no evidence of aliens. There's no evidence of that, and it's such a fringe thing. I don't want to believe something like that unless there is some type of evidence. It's just not productive to get into that. So, we do know in the past the U.S. government has actually promoted the idea of UFOs and aliens because it's a good way to cover top secret projects. It's better to keep people distracted with something silly like that than to have them actually focus on what it really could be, which could be a top secret project. So I don't know what it is. It's weird when we don't have any answers to it. That's all we know.
Yeah, it's a bit of an enigma, and of course we don't always have to have an answer for everything, folks. I'll be honest with y'all. I'm clueless as to what this thing is, but one day we'll eventually find out. Also, one other thing, I saw someone say something in the chat, and I was like, oh, that one's a good one. Let's see. Some people are talking about. Let's see here. What happened to the smaller pieces? Dang, I just hate this, folks. I can't find what made me think of something. I lost the train of thought, so I can't really get it back. But also, like, as far as aliens go, I'm not really a big believer in aliens. Oh, yeah, I remember what I was going to say. Actually, man, did you know that NASA actually unveiled to the public that there is credible signs of life on Mars?
Yeah, but like what type of life?
It
Like
was
we're
like-
talking about like
It's like
amoeba or something
bacterial.
like that.
Yeah, it was like bacterial life. But there was at some point, from what they can tell, some life that did exist on Mars, because apparently they did find some sort of fossil-like remains of fossilized bacterial-sized creatures that were inside of some of the rocks that they found and sampled on Mars. So apparently at some point they are now saying that there was some sort of existent life at a microbial level on Mars, but they can't confirm anything beyond that size. But it does confirm that Earth is not the only planet that was able at some point to support life. Mars actually was a planet that did support life at some point, but no longer does, and we don't really know why. But outside of that, there is the chance of life, at least from what we know now according to NASA, existing beyond this planet, but from what we can tell, due to astronomical observations of other nearby solar systems, if there is another planet that can support life out there, it is nowhere close to us. It is thousands of light years away, because we still have not found one that would have a plausible ability to support life, from what we can tell. So generally, it's a highly unlikely sort of a thing that it would be aliens, folks. And also on top of that, with NASA saying that there is proof of life on another planet at this point, which is Mars, it's not out of the question that if they did find proof of real life, like actual aliens, they would just tell people. Because it's really shocking in a sense in itself that they're going to say that there was life at all at some point on Mars. Because generally the concept was, for the longest time, we're completely alone out in the universe. There's nothing that even remotely suggests there was even life on another celestial body here in our solar system. So the fact that they would say that even, it leads me to believe if there was a sign of life out there, they'd be like, oh my God, there's like life out there somewhere. Because a lot of people would be pretty amazed and enthused to hear that sort of a scientific development. So I would generally say this probably isn't anything alien at all. I'd say the possibility of that is slim to none. This is probably something else entirely man-made. It's just that we don't know what the thing is yet. Anyways.
It is possible, though. Like, I'm not going to say it's impossible. I'm not one of these people. It's like, aliens don't exist, and if you say they could exist, then you're stupid. I'm not one of those people either. We don't have any evidence to prove it, and we don't have any evidence to disprove it either right now. So it's kind of like something that's kind of in the middle a little bit right here. So I don't know. Like, it is possible, but honestly, I would lean toward the idea, because in the past, it's been proven that when the U.S. flies classified projects, new aircraft, people always mistake them as UFOs every single time. And then later they come to realize, oh, look, that was the SR-71 flying around. Or, oh, that was the F-117 Nighthawk that we saw overhead. We were the first ones to see it. We thought it was a alien spacecraft. People always think that. So we don't know how far ahead the world powers are with their technology, because it's obviously kept secret for about a decade ahead of time before they release it to the public. So it could be something that's beyond our wildest dreams that's been developed. It could be, or maybe it could be something else. We don't know. But anyways, whatever the case is, we'll figure it out later. But anyways, moving on.
Also, I saw someone say, "Well, the universe being so big, why would we be flying solo?" I mean, there's great questions to be asked there, but to be honest, folks, I just don't really care to get into the alien thing too much, because it's like, if they exist or if they do not exist, it doesn't really matter to us, because we haven't been able to find a single sign of life within thousands of light years of this planet. So if they're out there, they're so far away, it'll never matter, because by the time we're ever able to create the technology to be a spacefaring civilization to where we are able to traverse hundreds of light years or even thousands, which is what we really would have to do, this planet will most likely be dead by then. It will be that far in the future, it doesn't even really matter. And also for the other planet, it would be the same situation. They might as well be alone out there. So as far as that sort of a deal, it doesn't really bother me too much. And in fact, like another thing, if they did exist, so what? If they don't exist, oh well. You know, that's generally how I look at it. If they exist, I mean, they've been around for a while from what people have been saying. They've been showing up for nearly 100 years now. They haven't really killed anyone. They haven't killed all of us. So apparently they're not extremely harmful. They're generally harmless to everyone. So it's not really anything of astute observation. We just don't really have enough dealings with them if they did exist for it to really register on my radar to something to think about. Maybe a fascination to a degree, but apparently they want to leave us alone for the most part, and we also want to leave them alone, so the feeling's mutual, and no real reason to delve into it any further if they did exist. That's how I generally look at it.
I would say honestly, like, just being perfectly honest, the only evidence that we really have so far that alien life might exist, and this isn't going on very much, folks. Like, it's Mark Zuckerberg. He's the only one we've got. So outside of that, so outside of that, I'm really not sure if we're ever going to be able to prove the alien theory. But at least we have Mark Zuckerberg. Like, that's the best thing we got.
Yeah, at least we got Mark. I mean, you know, he came from somewhere. He hasn't told us yet, but eventually he will. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Well, at least the best we can, actually. That was a pretty good one, though, Matthew. That was a good joke. I didn't see that one coming. I was like, bro, that was a great one. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here, actually moving into our first Super Chat for the last segment here. This one goes to Hokey Redneck, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Hokey, for that $50 support. And we appreciate that very, very much. And he said, Enforcer Matt, I bet you aren't even following Wexit with Alberta. And Hokey, I'm honestly not following that. I'll be perfectly honest with you. Those whole, like, I'll be honest with you, I don't really follow Canadian politics. It kind of hurts my head a little bit. It hurts my head actually worse than U.S. politics, the Canadian politics does. So I know generally what that's about. And I personally won't get into it on the stream because it might, trigger some people because it's a very sensitive topic in Canada. But I'm familiar with it, but I haven't been following it very closely. But yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing. It seems to be the in fashion thing to do these days is try to secede, I guess you could say. But Enforcer, what say you?
Oh, everyone's always wanted to secede from everywhere. Like, it's something that's always going on. California wants to leave. Texas wants to leave, or some parts of Oregon want to leave and join Idaho. Most of Western Canada wants to leave Canada. It's so on and so forth. It's like that everywhere. Hell, even in Germany, they have, I believe it's Bavaria exit or Bavexit, which is where Bavaria wants to exit the Federal Republic of Germany. I think you have secessionist movements in Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland and in France. Some people want to secede and create Brittany, which is this little peninsula out here. So I guess if that country did happen and they did get a seat at the UN, I guess they could show up every time and say, it's Brittany, bitch. To make an old millennial style joke there. Hopefully some people will get the reference. But there's always secessionist movements going on everywhere around the world. I don't really put a lot of stock into them because the chances of them succeeding, at least historically, is incredibly small. And usually that leads to a civil war, which really isn't beneficial for anyone. So I would have to say I haven't really been following it, and also it's a domestic political situation, and historically they just don't really turn into much. So I just kind of go and just keep moving on. But I do thank you massively for your support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it running. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, what's up with this like deal like in politics these days? Like one thing can happen, like for example, Watergate, like back in the day, and then they turn it into like all the different versions of Gate. Like I think there was one like Pizzagate. There's
Watergate.
Like a different one. It's like everything ends in Gate. And also with like then you had Brexit in Britain, and then it's like everybody else wants to copy that terminology. Oh, now we have Wexit. It's like can we not come up with like something like more original? It's like why do you have to copy the same thing? It's like why the copycat? Why not be original?
People are so unoriginal these days, man. Like everything turns into the something it. Like Alexit. Like if Alabama tried to leave the United States, it'd be called Ala-exit or Alexit. It'd probably be Alexit. It rolls off the tongue easier. But it's just stuff
like getting gone.
It's great. Like everything. Like this is also another one. It's make something great again. Like that's become an overly copied one, like the Gate thing, to the point that it's just gotten so old. Like I wish people would become more creative with naming stuff rather than just like, oh, Watergate, or the make something great again thing, or the exit thing, the something exit. Like it's like, can people come up with something new? And on top of that, it feels like a lot of these things only happen because people are trying to take the fire of the original thing and then redo it, to kind of get their own glory out of doing it. Like it doesn't really seem authentic. And I know some people are saying it's culture, bro, but people used to not copy things like this back in the day. Like most of the time people would come up with original stuff, and sure, some things were copied, but not this much. Like I feel like there's like any sort of a scandal that happens nowadays, like it's not anything like it used to be, like the Teapot Dome scandal or Tammany Hall, where they have like their own name and it's its own thing. If Tammany Hall or the Teapot Dome scandal happened today, it would be called Teapot Gate or Tea-Gate, or it'd be called Tammany Gate. Like there's no one who comes up with anything original anymore. It's always a copycat of something else.
Also, it's like it doesn't even make any sense either. It's like Watergate was the name of the building. It's like that was the name of the place. So it's not like it was like symbolic of some movement or something. It was literally the name of the building that got broken into. So it makes no sense. And also, I guess on the Brexit one, I guess you could technically like transplant that to the Canada situation. You technically could, but I don't know. Like it just seems lame to me. It's like we got to like come up with some like overused slogan for everything.
Yeah, it's just really like, and it makes everything feel so overdone. Honestly, folks, I feel like the modern age, to a sense, is one of the most creatively dead spaces that's ever existed in history. Because like when you go and look at new movies, it's like the Avengers movie number 20 or Shrek 16. It's like, how the hell do we keep on getting like these same overhashed things? Nothing's new, like in terms of media. And it even like folds over into naming conventions. Nobody comes up with anything new. It's just a repeat of the same stuff and people trying to catch the fire of the original thing and not doing it. And it's just really something that isn't. It's just so bad, honestly, creatively. And also, like, another thing, like, I gotta say this, like, regardless whether people agree with the slogan or the campaign or anything, like, Watergate was a big thing. The Make America Great thing may have been one of the most, one of the most iconic things of this century so far, at least as like movement names goes. But it's like it had, like, the first one, whether you liked it or not, it certainly is significant. People talk about it every day, whether they love it or hate it. But it's like, why the hell does everyone have to keep trying to recreate the wheel on that when it was like good or bad? It was culturally influential, that's for sure, on its own standalone. Why doesn't everyone else come up with their own thing or try and come up with something else that's original or new that will catch that kind of fire? Nobody does that anymore. Everyone has to go with
I think it's
Watergate,
because
the Brexit, or
I
that.
think it's because social media is naming it instead of like the like mainstream news. Like back when the mainstream news was naming stuff, they just like all sort of like got together the like group of them and they said, let's call it this. Now it's like the whole world gets a say in it. So social media picks the name of these movements now.
Yeah, but you know, like we come up with stuff here on the channel that's like pretty good. You know, like the 12-day war. I think we were one of the first people to say that. Um, but let's see what else. The turret toss. Like, you know, we came up with stuff here on this channel at least a few times that, you know, was pretty creative. It wasn't following anything else. You know, it wasn't like anything stupid. Like it wasn't like a repeat of something else. And it's like I just don't know why in the world a lot of people have to be unoriginal. And also on top of that, man, like the news does that a lot. Like the mainstream does, because they're just trying to get, like, they have cheap writers. They're really like not that good at their job. Like, I don't mean to diss on them, but you know, a lot of them just come up with like cheap stuff. So they're like, oh, let me think of like a scandal. Oh, Watergate. Okay, so what happened with this? Moneygate. And then they do that, and it's like, this is just so unoriginal. Like, it's like, can't we come up with original stuff? But anyways, with that, I hope that kind of addresses that somewhat well. But it really does annoy me, folks. The unoriginality of a lot of people in the modern day. It's like, come up with something new and original. Also, folks, please no politics. I only brought up that one because people repeat that a million times over and come up with different variations of it. It wasn't to say whether it was good or bad. And also, I didn't say whether I thought it was good or bad. I just said whether you like it or hate it. This thing has been culturally significant in terms of naming, and like, you know, y'all can't really disagree because y'all are openly saying y'all don't like it. So apparently it was culturally significant because you either liked it or you didn't, and you know about it. So with that, I hope that kind of addresses the point I was trying to make. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Lil Donut, who puts in a 50. And thank you very much, Lil Donut, for that support. And we do appreciate that very much. And they said, I'm in the middle, but love/hate or in the middle. More people need to listen to old speech here, which sadly, Lil Donut, I can't mention him as they're a politician. But they said it's the Yes We Can speech because the message behind it needs to be heard more than ever now.
And I would have to say that I would believe that a lot of people have to be told that America is a country worth something. I don't know what it is with a lot of people believing that America is cooked these days, because really it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If people keep believing that the country is finished, it will finish itself because nobody has faith in it anymore. And the only reason the country has survived for all this time is because people had faith in it. When the country split in two, people didn't give up. Lincoln had faith. The nation had faith. The Union had faith. They reunited the country. Back in the First World War and the Second World War, people didn't give up. They had faith in the country, and they fought till the bloody end to make sure that the country would succeed. This country has never been a path of roses. It's never been on a path like that. It's been a tough and arduous path, and yet every generation before us has continued to strive, fight, and die to continue to make this country into what it is. And I just think it's a huge disservice, to be entirely honest, that so many people are willing to give up on this country after so many people before them have suffered and toiled and died to make this country into what it is, for people nowadays to just give up on it, at least mentally, for no good reason. It's really crazy to me, folks, because I don't, like, people always make it sound like America's cooked these days, but it's like, I don't think a lot of people really think about what was happening back then. People were starving in the Depression, like starving to death sometimes. People in the Second World War were dying in the hundreds of thousands. People in the Civil War dealt with a fractured nation, truly fighting brother against brother sometimes. People were used to be slaves in this country at one point. You know, like, times were tougher back then, and people still persevered, and we made it through as a country and continued to make the nation into an even better thing than what it was, always. And it was never easy. There were always riots. There were always people getting killed. There was always political discourse, assassinations, terrible, dark times in this country's history. And yet we would all still find a way to pull together and make it through to the other side. And usually we would end up better for it than worse. And so I just don't know why some people want to give up on faith in the country, because I think that there's a lot worth fighting for here, and there's a lot worth fighting for just because of the fact, not that it has anything good or bad going for it, but it's our country and our country alone, and it's no one else's, it's ours. So let's take it for granted what we have. Not a lot of people in other countries get to say that they have their own. Some people live under the ilk of others. We are very fortunate in what we have here, and we should continue to be understanding that we are incredibly fortunate in having our own nation and having a say in how it runs, and continue to take that and run with it like we have been for 250 years. And so I hope that addresses that well, at least the best I can in my opinion, but a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and thank you for the support and helping the channel to keep rolling, because you help us to be able to say patriotic things in this channel every single day. So a huge thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Captain Chris, and he puts in a $40 donation. And thank you very much, Captain Chris, for that generous support right there, and also helping to keep the channel running with that generous support. And Captain Chris said, why doesn't Ukraine send drones to Belarus during the Zapad 2025? Or what's stopping them from trying to take them out somehow while or in transit to the training if attacking Belarus is a concern?
That's a good question. It generally is because when they're moving through Russia, they're probably moving fairly quickly. They are moving by train, and usually those trains are high priority express trains. They're pretty much given access to the railroad where everyone else has to sideline into a siding and wait for them to pass. So they move so quickly, it might be hard to time that right to be able to attack them while they're on the move in Russia. Generally, why they're not being attacked in Belarus, and I think you kind of addressed in the second part of your question there, is because they are in Belarus, and Ukraine has never officially conducted an armed action against Belarus, and it doesn't appear that they would like to, because that might actually open up another front in the north, which the Ukrainians generally want to avoid if at all possible. So I hope that does address the question well, and a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Inflamed Jenna, last name Tolls, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Jenna, for that support. They said, remember 2022 when we were hopeful our lives of generational tragedies was over? Those were the times. Honestly, it goes back farther than that. I remember when I graduated from high school back in mid-2019. It's like immediately the world went into pure chaos after that. The whirlybird virus hit, the worldwide global pandemic, which was obviously an immediate like just crash course right there with that. And then it went berserk after that. Then you got the Ukraine invasion that happened shortly afterward, just a couple years down the road. And it's just gone haywire ever since then. So ever since I graduated high school, it was like the flip of the switch. And things went nuts. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say, I remember a time back in the day. But there wasn't a time back in the day. You know, the fire's always been burning. And, you know, and when you think about it, we didn't start the fire. It's always been burning since the world's been turning. And it kind of has been, actually, like the song, you know. We didn't start the fire. But I mean, it's honestly true, folks, because really, like, we always think about it as a calm time, like there was a calm time, but there really has never been one. Like when you think about it, like at least when I think about it on a historical level, there has never been. Like a lot of people are always under the misconception, because a lot of people are taught a very finite linear timeline of history, that there was always just these little periods where nothing happened, like between World War I and World War II. A lot happened between World War I and World War II. People just don't talk about it. Like, after the Russian Empire collapsed, the whole of Eastern Europe was literally a free-for-all war zone. Like, it was the equivalent of Escape from Tarkov come to life across the whole of Eastern Europe. The Soviets invaded Poland in 1920. Ukraine invaded Poland in, I think, 1922. Then the Soviets invaded Ukraine, I think, in 1924. Everyone was invading everyone. It was an endless war in that region. And it went on, well on into the 30s, really. And so even during the interwar period, there was no peace. Like as far as peace in Western Europe, there was some. But beyond Germany, there was no peace in the rest of Europe. It was endless strife over there. And people just don't talk about it because it's a back page sort of a thing in American history. It's not important to us. But it was always going on. Like, honestly, like the Billy Joel song, We Didn't Start the Fire, it's honestly true, because even when you think that it was a peaceful time, it wasn't really. It's just that it was kind of peaceful in our relative region of the world. But I mean, hell, even after 9/11, we were in Iraq and Afghanistan. American soldiers were overseas fighting and dying in battles against terrorist forces in Iraq and the Taliban and Mujahideen in Afghanistan, all the way up until 2021, the very end of 2021. We got right out of that, and then immediately the war in Ukraine started. So when you really think about it, there wasn't really ever a peaceful time where things were okay. Everything has always been pretty much a wagon rolling downhill on fire, and we're all on board the burning wagon. And we're all trying to put out the fires. This thing keeps rolling down the hill, picking up speed. And one day, the wheels are going to give out, or the wagon's going to burn down because we can't keep putting out the fire well enough, and the whole thing's going to come to an end. But in the meantime, we're still fighting to keep the whole thing going. But outside of that, I generally have to say, it always seemed peaceful to an extent until you think about what was going on everywhere in the world all the time throughout all of history, and then it never really was peaceful. It was only peaceful for some people in some small areas, and so to them it seemed like the world was fine, but to everyone else it was quite literally on fire. But I do thank you massively for the support. And also on top of that, even thinking about it now, like let's think about the peacetime, or what we kind of think of as the peacetime when Iraq and Afghanistan was going on, and things in America kind of seemed honky-dory. Even still, like if you want to look at it in another way, I mean, the thing that's going on in China, in Western China right now, was going on back then to a degree. That was happening. There was still border clashes going on between India and Pakistan. In 2005, North and South Korea actually exchanged artillery fire across the DMZ. Like, there were a lot, they almost went into a full-blown war in 2005 between the two. Let's see, what else? What else could we bring up? Oh yeah, back in the 90s, so this is kind of out of the time frame, but still around there. Back in the 90s, China almost did invade Taiwan, and we had to send 2 carrier task forces out there to stop them. Let's see, what else? What else could we talk about that was happening in the 2000s? Oh yeah, Sudan split, had the Sudanese Civil War, which created Sudan and South Sudan, and then South Sudan went into a civil war after that of its own, and still hasn't gotten out of that. Let's see, what else? In the Middle East was just on fire back then, back in the 2000s. Europe was relatively peaceful for one of the few times in history. Most of the continent was relatively peaceful. There really wasn't anything going on. There were some things going on in the Balkans, though, still. So, I mean, that kind of counts. But when you think about it, there's always something going on somewhere. There really isn't ever a quiet time, but there are more active times. We certainly are in a far more active time now than we usually would find ourselves in. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Duncan VR, another channel legend, and he puts in a $25 donation. And thank you very much, Duncan, as well, for that support all the way from Australia. And he said, Bamu, quack, rough. Can we hear both enforcers doing the president voice again? Apparently he's angry with Putin. They're saying, sir. Putin's a jackass, sir. But I said, give him a chance. He's just a misunderstood guy, that's all. He just wiped all those people out in Russia because he was just a misunderstood guy, that's all. Just don't be a jerk. Give him some time. Give him some space, the poor guy. He's just such a misunderstood fellow. But tell us more.
Putin, stop! What are you doing? I think by putting out this post, I'm like Kylie Jenner when she did that ad with the Pepsi at the riots, and she was like, stop everyone, we can all get along with a Pepsi. It's a great, wonderful thing at Pepsi. I drink Diet Dr. Coke. Diet Coke, I think is what it's called. I don't really know. I don't give a shit. I just drink it. But outside of that, I've never seen a thin person drink Diet Coke. But beyond that, it's pointless to talk about that. Absolutely pointless. People go, sir, you're going to get canceled. And I'm like, let them cancel me. Let them cancel. You know, I've heard of a lot of things canceled. A lot of things, like a lot of casinos that I might have tried to open, but they didn't. Or massive projects like that one in Las Vegas that never really happened. Those bastards still owe me. But outside of that, I gotta be honest with y'all. I gotta be completely honest with y'all. I'm not really happy with this Putin guy. He's been Putin and shitting, and he's pissing me off. He keeps shitting on the peace deal, and I keep on trying to go, let's give it a chance. Let's give it a chance. A little ceasefire. I told everyone I'd be able to end this war in a day, and it's now about 10 months, and it still hasn't quit, and it keeps going, and it's kind of getting worse. They're like about to invade Europe and everything, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on with that? I had to completely back off the whole, we're going to leave NATO on their own, because now they're going to be going on into Eastern Europe, and I was like, wow, that's kind of a little bit of a twist. That's a 180. Damn, like, that's nuts. But beyond that, I do thank you for support. I hope this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that the best I can with a good impersonation, and I hope it was kind of a little funny. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to SC Dear Girl, who puts in a 20, and thank you very much, SC Dear Girl, for that support. And they said, what makes the green grass grow? And fertilizer makes the green grass grow.
Yes, yes, it does. The fertilizer. I just saw what that really said. I thought it was actually saying fertilizer. I was like, yeah, like nitrogen. I was about to go into a whole agricultural thing about nitrogen-based fertilizers, but I saw what that just actually said. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that the best I can. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Lee and Kate, who puts in a 20. And thank you as well, Lee and Kate, for that support. They said, good day, boys, and good day to you. They said the drone attack on Smolensk the other day, may this have something to do with Russian hardware entering Belarus? And could NATO have requested Ukraine to do a preemptive strike on material heading west? And also, by the way, Lee and Kate, I'm sure you probably heard, but also I don't think we covered it tonight in the news or not. I can't recall if we did or not. But the Smolensk nuclear power plant was allegedly attacked. This is a claim that Russia's making. They're claiming that a drone hit the nuclear reactor, but they're saying there was no damage to it and there was pretty much nothing that happened as a result of it. So that happened allegedly, at least according to the Russians, if you believe them on that, which, it's kind of hard to believe them on anything at this point. But that also happened. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it's possible, but I think it's a little unlikely because we did track down most of the targets that were hit around Smolensk, and most of them had to do with petroleum reserves, fuel operational facilities, and possibly the nuclear power plant. So it's possible. It definitely is within an area where that would be likely, but it doesn't really appear that that was the primary target because we haven't heard anything about that even being attempted to be hit. But a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 20 from Pemiyoy, and thank you, Pemiyoy, as well, for that $20 support. They said, I love the streams and the videos, and keep up the great work, boys, and much love from Utah.
And hey, much love to Utah, a great state, a wonderful state. And I gotta say, really cool place. Unfortunate what happened there recently, but I was out there for the first time ever, and I gotta be honest with y'all, Utah is an amazing state filled with amazing, nice people. I hate that happened there in Orem. It's really a stain on the reputation of the state, but they have amazing folks out there. They're incredibly nice, great, wonderful people. And I gotta say, a big thanks to you for the support and helping the channel to keep running. And thank you for wanting us to keep up the great work, because we try our best. Oh, we put our backs into it. Don't we, Matthew? We do. Yes, we do.
Putting that full-time work into it. I'll tell you what, putting your backs and everything into it.
We do. We put our backs into it, and that's pretty hard. We work on the internet. Do y'all know how hard it is to figure out a way to include your back muscles in working on the internet? It's hard. It takes a lot of effort to figure that out, and we do it. We do it. And also, of course, In-N-Out Burger was like absolutely incredible. I thought it was just like banger. The customer service, the food quality, it was pretty good. I was like, hey, that's pretty neat. I was like, that's pretty nice. I like it. So a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And you know something, folks. I wanted to include this. I wanted to include this because this is something I found very interesting about the Salt Lake City area. Is this mine? Like, this mine has honestly been on my mind for a good bit, because let me show y'all what it looks like. Oh, look, here's one of the mega dumpers, actually, Matthew, dropping off the tailings off the side of the cliff.
Oh, look at that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I actually got to see one of those folks actually do that, and it looked like a speck. This mine is so big, it looks like a little dot. Let me see if I can show y'all what this looks like out here. That is the mine right there. It looks like a giant anthill in a sense, and it's literally a whole mountain. Like, these mountains are thousands of feet tall, and they literally ate the mountain. Like the inside of it, the outside of it. It's just like the inner core of the mountain that's left. It's really a crazy sort of a thing. You could see, like, I'm not kidding, folks. You can see it from literally everywhere. Let me see if I can go further away and try and show it to y'all. So that's looking the other way. We turn around, boom, there it is again, the Bingham Canyon Mine. And if we go all the way over to here, let me see if I can get y'all a little panoramic up here. Let's see. Ah, dang, this is up in like a little, this is actually really cool. This looks like the Alps, but I'm trying to see if I can get y'all onto the summit, so that way we can take a little look around. Are all these the same? They are. They are all the same. Can we get anything that's higher up? Like right here? Oh, here we are. So, you can see it from all the way at the Twin Peaks, which is like, I think 15 miles away, 20 miles away or so. And look at that thing. It's so big, it takes up a large part of the Seeable mountain range over there. And also, Steve said, what do they mine there? They mine copper primarily, but they mine a whole bunch of stuff. It's a huge ore deposit. It's like an amalgamation of multiple different ores and minerals. And they just mine the whole thing. It's a giant pit mine. And let me see if I can try and show y'all what the inside of this mine looks like when you look down into it. This isn't really a good view. It's pretty cool that they have like observation posts and stuff in here. Let let's see. Here we are. This is a top-down view of this thing. Look at it. I mean, this is unreal, really, how big this thing is. Look at that. There are the giant excavators. Y'all know how big those things are? Well, not the giant excavators, the giant dump trucks. Let me see if I can show y'all a scale of these things. That is how big one of these things are, like relative to an old Chevy Tahoe from what appears to be the 90s or the early 2000s.
That's a Blazer, sir. That's a Chevy
Oh,
Blazer.
damn it! Like, I got it wrong. Matthew would know. Or here's a person for scale compared to one of these things. They're monoliths, really. And look how small they are down there.
That might have been a Suburban, actually. I'm not really sure. It was either a Suburban or it was a Blazer, one or the other.
I don't really know. I'm not really good at old cars or any cars for that matter. I hardly know a thing about them. But also, here's another example. That is a KAMAZ, like a KAMAZ supply truck the Russian army would use. There's one of those Caterpillar 75 710s, again, just to give you all an idea of the size of these things. And look how small they are in this mine. There they are. They look like specks compared to the absolute awe and size of the mine. Really, it's a feat of American industry that this thing exists. It's nuts. Like, when you look at it in the scale of this thing and how much ore and how much earth has been moved, it's truly a miracle of industry, something that's just fascinating to me. Like, I find this thing to be the neatest.
Yeah, this mine right here is truly bigger than you and me.
Get the hell out of here. Look, man, it's bigger than all of us.
Toad and Frog together again, mining away for copper.
But let me see if I can show y'all something else that's pretty cool. The Powder River basin area. So here's Powder River. I need to find where the mining happens because there was a lot of work that was done during the merger era back in the day in like the 80s and the 90s by the Union Pacific and the BNSF to expand their railroad operations around the Powder River Basin. And that's because there's a lot of coal mining operations that happen around here these days. But I can't find the thing. So unfortunately, I'll have to leave that alone for now. But I wish I could show it to y'all because it is super cool. Actually, you know what? Let me try and find it for y'all because I just saw the Enforcer Matt said something there for really quickly. So I'll filibuster for a minute. Let me go see if I can find the Powder River mines. The coal mines. From what I know, the Powder River Basin has a really low amount of sulfur inside of its coal, which makes it preferable for mining purposes. But here are some of the mines that you can find in the Powder River Basin area, and it's just nuts. These mines here in Wyoming actually provide 43% of all of the bituminous coal that we use here in America right now, and they're out here in the middle of nowhere around Wyoming. And I really want to find where these mines are for y'all, so that way y'all can see them. They are huge. And I just cannot find them. Let's see here.
You said a bituminous coal?
Bituminous coal, but it's like bituminous, something like that. I can't pronounce it well. I can't pronounce it well, damn it. But anyways, oh, wait a minute, here we are. So it starts at Casper, goes all the way up. So let's see, where's Casper? So it starts down here, and then it goes all the way up here. So these mines can be found anywhere in here. I'm having a really hard time finding them. But it's super cool because you'll see these unit trains of coal cars, hundreds of cars long, and they travel all the way across the country. It's a really just an amazingly cool thing because if you know about this power plant, Matthew, and I'm sure you will, it is the Ernest C. Gaston, and it's here in Alabama right here. And this power plant actually gets its coal from a unit train that travels all the way from Powder River Canyon, or the Powder River Basin out there in Wyoming, and it travels all the way across the country to here, to drop off its coal at this power plant, and then the train takes the trip all the way back across the country, back to Wyoming, to pick up the next load of coal and bring it to this power plant.
That's pretty cool.
It's pretty neat, honestly. It's pretty interesting. But with that, I hope we were able to give you all an interesting rabbit hole there. And a big thanks to you once again for the support and help this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one goes to Jay Bagwell, channel legend, by the way, and he puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Jay, for that support as well. He said, for the War Department suggestion box, 1,000 Toyota Hilux trucks, about 1,000 Oerlikon 20mm AA cannons, it would cost about $55 million, and money well spent.
I would agree.
Honestly, Jay, they need something like that because, like we've been saying, I actually responded today to a fellow. I won't name the newspaper, but I've gotten into it with this fellow before. He's an editor at a pretty well known newspaper here, and he's one of these defense experts, self-proclaimed defense experts. That I believe this might be the same guy that might have said the war was going to end in 3 days between Russia and Ukraine, but it turned out that they were wrong. But I'm not going to name them though. Not trying to start beef. But they were arguing that NATO can go after the launch sites for the drones if we got into a war. And I was like, well, it's like most of the launch sites for these drones are mobile now. Like Russia is launching Shaheeds off the back of pickup trucks. So that's not stationary. That's not a stationary target. You can move that around different places. So right now, NATO is basically defenseless to large drone swarms. They can try to shoot stuff down, but it's going to be very difficult if they come in large numbers. So it sounds crazy, but like a Toyota Hilux trucks with Oerlikons in the back, that might be a better defense than none when it comes to shooting down these drones. But Enforcer, what say you?
Honestly, that is the defense. That's what the Ukrainians use, and it's the most effective thing seen to date to deal with the drones, because the drones are cheap, they're slow moving, and they really can't evade, so a technical can easily deal with them. And honestly, I think at this point, Jay, I think it actually would be pertinent for the Marines and the Army specifically to start fielding entire battalions of self-propelled air defense gun crews that just use technicals like that. I think that'd actually be wildly effective and also incredibly cheap. It wouldn't take a lot to do that. But then again, a lot of people would be complaining, but what about my contracts? And then we'd have to deal with them. And then they would sell us a technical with a 20 millimeter mounted for about, $5 million each. And then we would be dealing with that. But I think that would be better than nothing. And that's the most effective thing we've actually ever seen. So I think it's a pretty good idea, and definitely a cheap stopgap, because once the directed energy weapons or the laser systems come online in a couple of years, then we can just phase all those out, and it really didn't cost us a hill of beans or anything to get that kind of air defense. So a huge thanks to you so much once again for support, Jay. And I would have to say, you're on the ball with forward thinking. I think you're thinking well ahead of most military analysts. You might actually, you know what, Jay? I think you could be a military analyst at one of the top papers. Because I'll be honest, Jay, with the analysis that they put out, it's not that good. Like it's not that good. Anyone with a brain, I think, could do better than most military analysts these days. But you really have a lot of wit and a good amount of intelligence about this sort of stuff. You also have prior experience with it. So I would have to say, really good observation. I think that's what the military should do. I would completely agree with you.
I think to be a military expert these days and working at like a large mainstream outlet, you just have to have a couple of things. You have to have unbelievable arrogance. That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, you have to be the best resume fluffer that the world's ever seen. Like, you know how to pack those buzzwords in that resume like nobody's ever seen before. And number three, you have to have a good dose of I guess you could say blind confidence as well, because like we've said before, I've been saying this for a long time. This was literally something that even the professors said where I went to college studying political science. There is no science to like making predictions with things like happening in war. You can try to make educated guesses, but to say you know something for a concrete fact, you're running a fool's errand. And all these experts want to make these concrete conclusions and predictions and say, oh, this war can only last for about 3 days maximum because I know what's best. It's like, okay, that tells us you really don't know what you're talking about, because you should know that you can't predict things with that type of certainty. So, that's just my thing. The experts to me are just like they put forth the image they're an expert, but they really don't back it up.
Well, it's those same experts, man, that sat there and said before World War II, oh, it's going to be a trench war again. It won't be a mobile war. Mobile wars, they just don't happen anymore. And then that's why France got steamrolled, is because they kind of believed that. And also, like, it's those same military experts that made the worst abomination I've ever seen, which is the TOG 2. This thing is called the TOG because a whole bunch of people with World War I era tank experience came together and said, well, jolly-o chaps, we have to make a tank for the new wall. And so they came up with this piece of shit, and it was terrible. Like, they completely shelved it because it was that bad. They designed it with the idea, well, obviously it's for trench warfare, and the trenches are going to be even wider to deal with the tanks of old, so we'll just make the tank longer. And it was so long they couldn't even really steer it. The only thing that you took from this was the turret. They put it on the Challenger, the first Challenger that the British ever had, which was used in World War II. It has nothing to do with the Challenger 1 or the Challenger 2. But a lot of these military experts, or the ones that like to get the prestigious titles of working with a larger publication, a lot of them don't really know what they're talking about. And a lot of them are experts on how the last war was fought, but they never think or innovate on what the next war is going to look like or what we should do to innovate, which is always the issue because you end up with stuff like this. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can because Matthew's dead on the nail with that, and we've had plenty of people who claim that they're experts tell us that we're wrong, and then they end up being wrong literally within weeks after they said something wouldn't happen. It happens, and then we're like, okay, well, apparently expert doesn't really count for much. But anyways,
Ooh, I'll tell you what, they loathe people like us. Like, and it's not everybody, by the way, because obviously there are people that watch our channel that we've named before that are considered experts, and that they don't hate our guts. But there are some experts out there that are so arrogant, and they look at us and they think, oh, they haven't fluffed their resume enough, or they haven't paid their dues by working as like the low level of one of these organizations, like a media outlet or something like that. So they just dismiss everything, and it's like that's why y'all are failing and we're not. That's the truth of it. It's like that arrogance right there. Nobody buys that anymore because they've been wrong on so much stuff, as they want to be like the know-it-all about everything, that they've lost their credibility. That's why they're failing. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat here, this one goes to Terry Strife, and Terry puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Terry, for that support as well. They said, thanks for the great news, and keep up the great work, and be safe out there.
and thank you so much for the support, Terry, and we will be safe, and we will keep up the great work. And so a huge thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Sligoy the Sauce, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Sligoy, as well, for that support. They said, did you guys ever get to see the Christmas train? And I think it comes in from Canada.
I've never actually been able to see the Christmas train. I know that CSX has one. It's just that I've never been able to see one myself. But I do thank you massively for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 20 from Marion Diemert. And Marion said, wake up, U.S., wake up.
And I'd have to say, hopefully, they will in a lot of ways. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And someone said, you're young idiots. Like we haven't heard that one before.
We got somebody here who works for the main newspaper rags, I guess. Somebody got butthurt by that comment.
Oh, there's always someone out there. Like, I don't know if the people who say that know this, but we've had just about every single bitter person ever come at us. Like people I knew for years sometimes do that. Like, and it always comes off the same. Like, I don't know if y'all know that. It's just like angry, bitter people who hate to see that someone's actually doing well and actually does their job well, and then they just go, you're an idiot, and then they have like no proof as to why we're stupid or anything that we've said that's been incredibly wrong. Like, and yeah, we said things that were wrong and we just corrected. And I feel like that's a lot more maturity than a lot of these bitter people have who say that we're idiots, because a lot of them don't have too much arrogance to admit that sometimes they are prone to err on certain kinds of analysis. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
What are the odds? Like, because, you know, people that work for these larger news outlets and stuff, they have burner accounts because they don't want to associate their name with some of these comments they're making. What are the odds? Like, because they literally come in like bashing us right after we made comments about the experts. And what are the odds that somebody that's like, you know, getting pissed because we're saying, oh my God, they're attacking my job. Like, that's not allowed. It's like, oh, jeez, man. But anyways. Jumping into our next super chat here, this one goes to Old Warrior, who I believe has already left for the night, and he put in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Old Warrior, for listening tomorrow for that support right there, and we appreciate that. He said, I looked up the TM62, and from Google, a TM62 anti-tank mine contains approximately 7.5 to 8 kilograms of explosive with common fillers of different substances here, and a grenade's under 6.7 ounces.
And I gotta say, thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Old Warrior. And it's a lot. Like, it's a load of explosives that is inside of an anti-tank mine. They have to have it so they can take out a tank. But it's always just shocking to see them go off, because you always think that an anti-tank mine wouldn't be that big, but they're like 500. Like when they explode, they look like 500-pound bombs going off. It's wild stuff. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Little Donut, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Little Donut, as well, for that second support tonight. They said, hey, Tom, and SYBAU.
And I gotta thank you for the support, Little Donut. Nay! And a huge thanks to you once again. I get to thank you incredibly, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing a possibility. You know, we wouldn't be able to grease the gears to keep this channel running. Folks like you give us the money to go to Standard Oil and get ourselves some nice motor grease and to keep the gears of this machine rolling every day. So a massive thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
That's probably why Russia's having so much trouble because they don't have any more lubricants because the lubricants train got hit before it could get to Diddy's place. But that's
Oh,
probably why. That's probably why the Russians are having a hard time. The train didn't quite make it to its final destination. But jumping into our next one here, this one goes to Lil Donut once again, who puts in a 20. He said, "You don't need to read the Tom super chat out loud. That's just for him."
and I gotta think of his support. I mean, we read it out loud anyways, a little donut, and I gotta think of it being a little donut. So big thanks to you once again. I hope that it's addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Trezzy, who puts in a 15. And thank you very much, Trezzy, as well for that support. They said, hi from Norway, and we currently have your carrier visiting Oslo, and I'd love to capture some cinematic drone footage of your ship, but I'm worried the drone might get shot down. Now, Trezzy,
yeah.
I think what would happen with that is I think it would probably trigger a security response, to be perfectly honest with you, because the drone flying over there, especially these days with drones being a weapons threat, they would probably freak out. Like, I'll be perfectly honest. You could try to get permission though, I guess from the local people around that, but I would probably doubt they would agree to it. But Enforcer, what say you?
Generally, what would happen with that, they probably wouldn't shoot your drone down, but what they would do is they immediately spot it, observe it, and then they contact Norwegian authorities because they really can't do a lot within Norwegian territory without Norwegian permission. And then the Norwegian police would come there immediately and give you a visit and be like, "What are you doing?" So you might want to try and ask for permission from someone who may be able to give you permission to do that, but do not do that because you will freak out the U.S. personnel on board the warship, and then that'll freak them out, and they'll contact the Norwegian authorities, and then they'll come by and ask you what you're doing. You're not going to get in like any severe trouble. You're not going to get arrested or anything for it, most likely, but still there would be a lot of questions asked. I mean, the possibility is there, so always make sure to ask for permission, and don't do that unless otherwise. I mean, if you take a picture at it from the wharf, that's fine, but flying a drone around it might be fairly scary for everyone involved. But I do thank you so much for the support and wanting to do that, and also I hope that you do enjoy it. The Gerald R. Ford is the pride of the U.S. Navy right now. It's the most advanced carrier we have in the service, so please make sure to go down there and look at it. Not a lot of Americans get to see the thing, so you're quite fortunate actually that it's in Oslo where you can see it right now. So a huge thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Bobby43, and he puts in a 150 Canadian, and a huge shout to you, Bobby, for that support once again, also known as LC39A, by the way. But now he goes by Bobby. He goes by the first name here, and he says, I am 10 times better than the both of y'all in being wrong. Is that true though, Bobby? I don't know. I don't know about that. Me personally, I don't see anything wrong in being wrong. The only part of being wrong that becomes a problem to me is if it happens too often, or if someone's wrong and they don't have the balls to admit they were wrong. As long as people admit, okay, I was wrong with that, I learned from it, and I moved on. Like, to me, that is okay, like acceptable. But if someone's like, okay, I got that wrong, but I was kind of right though, and also I really didn't learn anything from it, I'm just going to move on and pretend like that didn't even happen. Now then that to me becomes a problem at that point, which seems to be what mainstream news does all the time these days. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, mainstream news won't even give a retraction anymore. Like, they won't even admit some culpable deniability, and a lot of people do that here on the internet. We've seen it a few times, so we'll be like, dang, eventually they'll have to give a retraction to that because that was just egregiously wrong. Like the information was wrong. And then they never will. And it really says a lot to people's egos that they just can't admit when things are wrong. I mean, we've done that a lot. Sometimes I do that on air. I'll be like, this is not the case. And then someone will be like, no, you're wrong. And I'll be like, oh. And then I'll pull it up and I'll be like, oh, damn, I'm wrong. Yeah, I'm actually wrong. I'll have to eat my foot. Well, that's what I usually say. I just say it up front. Because it's like, if you're wrong, you're wrong. I mean, there's no problem in being wrong. Everyone's going to be wrong eventually on something. It's not like your whole life is ruined because you got something wrong. But when people get something wrong and then they don't admit it, and then they also act like even though they got it wrong, they're still right in the end, like, I'd have to agree with Matthew. That's usually when I have an issue with folks, especially when it comes to analysis. And also, one thing I don't like is that when people let bias fuel their analysis, and you see that a lot, like with NATO, like for example, like drone warfare is a shortage that we have right now. It's a chronic one that we need to address. And, we'll sit there and say something like, man, NATO's really behind on that. We need to catch up. Or I'll say something like, well, the Baltic states, Latvia and Estonia specifically, have very small professional armies, and they need to change that. And then people will go, oh, no, you bastard. And then like they act like, I'm completely wrong. Although there's decent or Matthew's completely wrong with the drone warfare side of things, when there's decent credence analysis-wise to say that those are issues. And I feel like that kind of confidence is what usually ends up getting folks in our side of the world killed, is because we are overconfident in some of our abilities, and then we don't innovate. And because we didn't innovate, because we were overconfident, we pay for that in blood. And I feel like that's something that really shouldn't be the case, and a lot of people should always be trying to think ahead and be proactive and really analyze things and critically think about them, because the answer always isn't going to be great. Sometimes it might not be. But it's huge thanks to you once again for support, Bobby43, for the massive support and help with this channel to keep on running. And I have to say, Bobby, from what you've said before, I don't think you're wrong on a lot of things. You really get a lot of things on the nail, at least in my opinion. But a big thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Robert Krogan, and Robert puts in a 10. He said, a little bit to give tonight in LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for giving a little bit to the channel. A little bit's a lot to us, and I got to thank you massively for enjoying the channel, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from William Seeger, and William said, I'm ready for the intel brief.
Hey, and I hope you enjoyed it tonight. We gave a really long one. It was about 2 hours long. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Shaky Jake 117, and thank you, Shaky Jake, as well. He said, Enforcer Matt, what are the chances this war game is a ruse, and they will head to Kyiv in force, and Putin wants Ukraine? It's possible, Shaky Jake. It is definitely possible. There's two different attack vectors that they could take, the Russians and the Belarusians, if they wanted to pull off an escalation. They could either attack a Baltic state, they could take the Suwalki Gap. Actually, there's three. The Suwalki Gap's one of them, the Baltic states are another, and the third one is they could invade Ukraine from the north. That's a possibility as well. So I would say, honestly, I would say equal possibility with all of them, but it's not a certainty. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say out of the three, a northern offensive into Ukraine is the least likely, because the Russian forces are mostly around Grodna. So they would have to haul ass actually to get down into the southern side of Belarus. And even still, it would take a little bit of while for them to get their equipment set up, make sure that their war plans are laid out and their offensive actions are mapped up, and then we would be able to see it coming, really, at least a couple of days or a couple of weeks in advance. A lot like we're seeing this new offensive in southern Ukraine coming up weeks in advance before it's going to happen. As a matter of fact, really months, if we consider the first pieces of information to be prudent. It's been months that we've been watching this new offensive getting ready to be conducted inside of Ukraine. And even still, it's taking a long time. So if they wanted to do a new offensive into northern Ukraine, we probably see it coming. So I would say that out of the three, the invasion of the Suwalki Gap or the Baltics is the most likely out of this. And luckily for the Ukrainians, I think they'll generally, the chances are high, be avoiding a northern offensive. And so a big thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Ross Nib, and Ross put in a $100 support right there, and thank you very much, Ross, for one of the largest super chats of the night, and we appreciate that very, very much. And Ross said, we love your work down here in Australia, fellows, and people worry a lot about the axis of evil, but now we are seeing the emergence of the axis of Diddy.
No, Diddy.
Oh, no. He said, keep up those updates on lubricants, and celebratory parties are hanging into balance. I'm telling you what, that Putin right there, he's never been to a Diddy party. I tell you what, he's never been. I'm not sure if he wants to go, but you know, they're saying things. They're saying things. But Enforcer, what say you?
Ain't nothing like a Diddy party. Ain't nothing like a Diddy party. But beyond that, I got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Ross Nib. And I got to say, that one blindsided me a little bit. I had to read it, like, while Matthew was reading. I was like, oh my goodness. And then when you said Diddy, I was like, no, Diddy. But I got to say, a huge thanks to you for the support. And I got to say, folks are worried about the axis of evil, but we'll make sure to keep the axis of Diddy well in the news coverage about those lubricants trains that are getting blown up by the Ukrainians in Zaporizhia. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. Pretty funny one, by the way. I got to admit, that was a pretty smart one there. But with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, you can't forget about the axis of. You can't forget about all that too. It's just I got this bad cough from developing, folks. Like when you talk about list and I'm not really sure about all that stuff, to be honest with you. But anyways, jumping into our next one here. This one goes to a Magic who puts in a 10, and they said, "Thank you guys for keeping me up during my night shift that ends at 6 a.m. And dang, by the way, good luck." They said, "I wish Ivan would wait to do this until I get back from vacation, and long live the West."
And long live the West. And I gotta say, That is one hell of a night shift right there. 6 a.m. in the morning. Jeez, how do you sleep? Like, I have a hard time sleeping sometimes because the sun will start to shine and the blackout curtains don't work too well in my room. And I always wonder when people go to sleep and it's actually daylight out, how do you sleep? Because I have a hard time doing it, and I kind of get to bed when it's still dark out. But I got to say, a big thanks to you for the support. And ooh, that is tough right there. And hopefully they'll begin it after you return from your vacation, at least for your news coverage sake and getting to watch the show. But a big thanks to you once again. I hope that I was addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $10 support from Inflamed Jenna, last name Tolls, who puts in a 10. They said, hear me out. Isn't a perpetual 2 weeks, isn't that purgatory?
Yeah, kind of. Like, I guess. But I do thank you for the support and helping the channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to none other than Michelle. I think it's Michelle. Michael. I think Michael. Michelle. I think. I'm not sure. Michelle Lavoy, who puts in a 7. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support. He said, I understand why you don't cover American politics, but don't you think it will align with the world politics soon?
Not really. There's not really a lot of direct correlations between domestic politics and world affairs in any way. And a lot of people like to say that war is an extension of politics, but really war is more so an extension of diplomacy and foreign policy. And generally, while a lot of people like to think that politics plays a big role in how that works, there's kind of like a one-tracked sort of a system on how it works and what you kind of have to do. That's why you don't really see a lot of people deviating from it most of the time and completely changing everything, because it's pretty set in stone what we have to do. But beyond that, I don't really like domestic politics, to be entirely honest. I find it to be venomous, nonsensical, poorly informed. Most people who get involved in it are really, like, heavily involved in it, are really poorly educated on the topics they're even talking about. And that's not on one side or the other. Like, that's not making a jab at the left or the right. That's really for people on the far sides at both ends. I just don't really like the stuff. And on top of that, a lot of people are really crass when it comes to that sort of a thing. Like, a lot of people will take, the deaths of people or a tragic incident and then use it as a soapbox for some goofy political motive. Like something could happen, like what let's see, let me think of something that would happen in this country, something generic, so that way it's not calling on something that's happened recently. So something could happen, like, someone could get in a car crash and, kill, 20 people on accident in a bus or something. And they happen, like, the person who happened to do that was a registered member of a political party. And they'll go, see, that's why the licenses need to be revoked from the members of that party, because they are bastards. And it's like, this makes no sense. That's why I generally don't get involved in it. And, I generally like to keep it just politically neutral. We just focus on foreign policy and foreign affairs and just leave it at that. And it seems like a lot of people enjoy that kind of neutrality. So I like to keep it that way. But a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Call of Kurtlu, who puts in the 10. And they said, given Russia has brought and got North Korean troops into this fight, why doesn't the UK, France, Poland, etc. go help Ukraine independent of NATO, at least with air support or missile defense?
Generally because it would probably turn into a third world war as a greater whole of NATO is what we're assuming. So that's the concern that stops everyone from getting involved. And also there's a lot of other foreign affairs and diplomatic situations or internal politics in the NATO alliance that stops them from doing that. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And I thank you once again for support and helping the channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $10 support from Paul Gill. And Paul said, what would Russia benefit from a war with NATO? And keep up the great work, enforcers, and Slava Ukraine.
They don't really stand to benefit much. They could end up all getting killed in that sort of a war against NATO. They could end up in a nuclear holocaust. But what they would generally be going for is some sort of major concessions by pretty much holding all of us hostage here in the West and saying, we will nuke you all, and pretty much, we might all end up dying in Russia, but the Russians will certainly kill everyone in the West as well for the larger part, unless you give us these things. That's what they're kind of looking for. That's really the only sort of diplomatic play that I could say would make any sense from their perspective. It's an all or nothing sort of a bet or a gamble that they're making at that point, but that's what they would stand to benefit from. If we didn't lean into it, the high chances are a lot of people would end up getting killed on both sides. If we did lean into it, a lot of people would stand to get killed later, but we would give up for now. That's kind of the situation we find ourselves in at the moment. But with that, I hope that does address it well. Big thanks to you once again for support, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Talon, who puts in a 10. And they said the B-2 is capable of carrying 16 B-83 strategic thermonuclear bombs. They have a dial yield up to 1.2 megatons. And a single B-2 can destroy Moscow, St. Pete for each, and still have 8 left for other bases. That's the capabilities.
And that's true. The B-2 is a very potent sort of a bomber, but what is even crazier is that a single Minuteman III could do that on its own, while not wiping out Moscow and St. Petersburg without it having to be a B-2 bomber. It's actually a little crazy, the destructive nature of the ICBM, but it's a kind of crazy thing to understand the kind of firepower that we actually possess in terms of our nuclear arsenal. But a huge thanks to you once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Pemioy once again. And Pemioy said, speaking of aliens, NASA thinks they found life on Mars. That's kind of cool. And take one from the chat.
Yeah, it actually is pretty cool. And apparently, like, unlike other times where they say, hey, we think we found life on, like, a satellite or something like that, you know, looking at Europa or something along those lines, they actually were able to say that it appears to be some sort of bacterial fossilization that occurred in the sediment. So that's actually really cool. And if they are able to completely confirm that, which they say they're really close to doing right now, that will be very cool to know that there actually was once life on Mars at some point. Who knows what happened to it, but still pretty wild stuff. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have the live chat question here from YMSD, who said, do you think World War III is going to kick off within the coming days or weeks?
I don't really know. I would say that the chances are way on up there, like within the next few years, but I don't really know within the next few days or weeks. I'm kind of up in the air about that one. But still, a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Invalid Name Watcher, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much for that support as well, and we do appreciate that. We also have a 10 from 2 hot dog guys and 1 cup of snow. They said a pimp marmot bought a spaceship with this cash, and he earned off his street flies that apparently can't get taken out. And Slav Ukraine, LLTLSA, and can we all just get along and take one from the chat?
And thank you so much for the support, 2 hot dog guys, 1 cup of snow. And I mean, it would be nice if we all got along, but wouldn't things become a lot less interesting? I'm just kidding, by the way. It would be nice, but that will probably never happen in our lifetime. But still, we will make sure to get one from the live chat in your honor. So, Matthew, what do we got?
So this one from the live chat is going to go to none other than Ms. Disa, who said, what's Finland doing about all this?
Ah, the Finns. They're kind of just up there doing their thing. Like, that's the best way I could describe it. They're, you know, bolstering their defense here and there. Nothing incredibly urgent. They're just kind of sitting around waiting for the day that a Russian would. Like, it's the best way to say it. So a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Lily White, who puts in a 7 and said, sarcasm levels are off the charts, LOL.
It always is, like, really. But a huge thanks to you once again for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Clank Clank, I'm a Tank, who puts in a 5. They said, Russia has weird laws on what troops can be sent to Ukraine, and they have a lot of soldiers that are not allowed to be sent to Ukraine.
And
Are you sure about that? Because I see all kinds of people being sent to the front. Like, I see disabled people being sent, old people being sent. If they have those laws, they're really not abiding by them.
I think that would be... They have a word for it in Russia, for the... I think it's like the contract Niki is what they're called. Well, not that. No, that's the professional guys. It's like, I forgot what it is, but it's something to say that they're like conscript troops. But they have a specialized word in Russian for that. I just can't think of it right now. But those are the ones that technically are not legally allowed to go out of the country. But they end up in Ukraine anyways. It's just that they do a little dog and pony show to find a stupid loophole that they come up with, send them there. But technically, you're right. But we haven't really seen that apply too well in Russia, because we've heard of many prisoners of war claiming that they are actually pretty much the conscripts, more so than the professional soldiers. So on paper, that's supposed to be the case, but in real life, they do send conscripts. But I do thank you for the support and help with this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Scuba Aside, who puts in a 5. And they said, if and when NATO and Russia start scrapping, how likely is it that they'll just bombard us with conventional ICBMs as opposed to nukes?
I would say, it would be unlikely, because they aren't going to go to that immediately. They would want to see if they could give it a chance on the battlefield and reach some sort of negotiated settlement, because if they fire ICBMs at America, America is firing ours back. They're not going to survive that. We will also die in that hellfire but the Russians will not survive that either. So they probably wouldn't do that immediately because it's not like there's a devoid response. There would be a response. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to 3L Prohibido, who puts in a 5. And they said the best base and worst case for Suwalki in the next 14 days, with probabilities totaling 100%.
I would say, let's see, best case. The best case scenario is that nothing happens. I would say that that's a 30% chance. The most likely incident to happen is that the Russians try and cross the border, but they don't do anything extremely violent and not a full-scale invasion. They'll probably try a little border incursion. It'll end up being a border skirmish, and they'll back off. I would say that that has about a 30%, 33% chance of happening. And then the last chance, worst-case scenario, is that they start a full-scale invasion in the Suwalki Gap, and World War III begins. The Polish and Lithuanians would be able to hold in the meantime while other forces from Poland and the rest of NATO come to their aid, but that would be the start of World War III, which would open up a whole myriad of things out of Pandora's box that we would not want. So I hope that does address that the best I can, trying to total it up to 100% off the top of my head, but a huge thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Oh, so by the way, someone said a best case scenario, nothing ever happens. I cannot stand like the people that go around saying nothing ever happens. Yeah, it's like, are you blind? It's like you'd have to be blind. It's like the stuff happening right now. It's like everything's happening. It's like not only is nothing not happening, but everything's happening. It's like people have to be blind that are saying that, or they have to be just rage baiting or trolling people, one or the other. But anyways, getting on to our next one here. This one goes to Kyle Padell, who puts in a 10 and said the axis of Diddy, Chris's mom, and Hot Dog Man.
And I'd have to say, that is one hell of a alliance right there of Axis powers. That's concerning, because the Hot Dog Man's probably the worst of them. But still, a huge thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And also, Matthew, I found it. Matthew. I found the thing. It's chud maxing.
What's that about?
It's the chud.
Who's that?
It's something that someone drew of some nut who did something stupid here in America, but he's been called the Chud since then. And this is the nothing ever happens kind of thing. A Chud doesn't concern himself with what happens. The Chud maxing thing, nothing ever happens.
Well, he looks stupid.
Well, he is stupid. He is definitely stupid. But with that, I hope I introduced Enforcer Matt to the real Chud meme, the Chud Jack, as it's called.
Nice to meet you. Good to meet you.
But you know, I got to be honest with y'all, folks. People have got to stop being chronically online. I pray to the Lord that one day people will stop being chronically online. I know these stupid memes. I'm not chronically online though. I think they're absolutely stupid, but still, I know of them. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Schmo Lettuce. Oh, thanks so much for that lettuce. They put in a $5 donation. They said, how do y'all see this war coming to a conclusion?
Who knows? I hate to say that. I know that you're probably looking for a clear answer, but I have no clue. It could turn into a third world war. It could actually turn up one day in a negotiated settlement, or the Russians might collapse and it turns into something totally different. It's just really hard to say. It's always impossible to really say how a war will end with any kind of certainty, because every single day and every single week of a war can change exactly how this will end. So it's really hard to say. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really feel comfortable making that kind of prediction, because it has a 98 to 99% chance of being completely wrong by the end of this whole thing. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Alan Gwinner. And Alan said, Russia is pretending it's a distraction to keep resources away from Ukraine, and Russia can't back it up.
Possibly, but it is the fact that they could, and that's what's the concerning thing about it, at least at the onset. But a huge thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Siri, who said, if I were an alien, I would take one look at this planet and say, nope, LOL. And also, great job, Enforcer Bros. I hope the move went well. And XO from Oslo.
You know, there's actually a joke out there by some people who are like, what if aliens are easily passing by the Earth all the time, different types, but they look at Earth as like the Detroit of the galaxy, and they're like, we don't want to go down there because those people are crazy. And honestly, like, I could see that. Like, I could definitely see that. We are a very violent bunch of people. Like, like it's not hard to find violence in the world somewhere out there. Just look over the past week and there's plenty of examples of it everywhere. So maybe that's the case. But still, a huge thanks to you once again for support, and a big XO to Oslo, and a huge thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Andrew Honeycutt, who puts in a 5. He said, social media ostensibly, sounding this out like I'm in preschool, but let me restart that.
Ostensibly.
I'll tell you, call me that Chud Maxer fellow there that you're doing there, whatever his name was. Anyway, let me get back to it. Anyway, Andrew said, social media ostensibly keeps us connected while keeping us further apart. Pandora's box has been opened. Information is a weapon now, unfortunately. And you're correct. You're correct, Andrew. It really is, honestly. Social media has become the plague. Mainly, here's my new take. And this isn't the only reason, but it's just a main reason. Because people that should not have a megaphone now have a megaphone. There should be free speech in the country, but we have to be careful who gets a megaphone, because there are psychopaths out there, and we've dealt with them, and some of y'all on this channel have seen these lunatics. Hot Dog Man's one of them, a complete lunatic that now has a megaphone and a voice to spread that toxic crap to everybody in the country. And there are other people that will relate to that, believe it or not. They'll hear that toxic bullcrap that guy spews, and they'll go, oh, I relate to that. I have that vitriol and hatred in my soul, too. And now I can join this community, and we can all form a big community here to start hating on everybody. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous. It leads to a bunch of division. But Enforcer, what say you?
You know what's interesting about the internet? It completely removes what people actually look like and how they behave from the equation. Because I bet you, if all of y'all saw the cracked up loser Hot Dog Man in person, a lot of people are like, this guy's like whack. I wouldn't have nothing to do with him. But because he's on the internet, people sit there and go, oh, well, I think I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And they do, like, that happens with a lot of people out there. And like, if you saw these people in person, you would be like, this guy is a loser. And not only that, he seems whack. I wouldn't have anything to do with them. That's what most people would act like. But because of social media, these people can actually band together and come up with little sick groups. Like on all ends, like it's not just him. There's a lot of them out there. We've dealt with plenty of them on all ends, like far right, far left. Hell, at one point, this was the most hilarious thing. We had one far right group hating on us at the same time that Hot Dog Man, which is generally far left, was also hating on us at the same time. And they like united together for a short period in their unified hatred against us. And then that didn't last long because, of course, they had completely different beliefs politically. And then they went to eating each other up and tearing each other apart. And it's like, it's just weird to look at that kind of stuff and think that a lot of these people who are just mentally unwell, clearly, and also losers on top of that, have a voice at all. And like, I would have to agree with Matthew on that. The internet gives a lot of these angry, lame people who don't have an ability to make it at all in life on much of anything a megaphone they really should not have. They're not really upstanding members of the nation, their local municipality, or their state, really. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also our next one here goes to Stay in the Pursuit, who puts in a 5. They said, currently in Vilnius, Lithuania, 50 kilometers from Belarus border. Oh, that's where you are now. They're in Vilnius, Lithuania. They said, how screwed am I?
Yeah, it's not really. You're pretty fine off. Like, if you're in a country, if you're in Lithuania, you're good. Like, honestly, Lithuania has a great military. They will be able to defend themselves without a doubt until the rest of NATO arrives. So you're fine. You're great. Lithuania is the best Baltic state to be in right now in terms of their ability to defend themselves. Also, really cool that you're in Vilnius, because the story behind the founding of Vilnius and its name is really neat. It's kind of like the Lithuanian version of the Romulus and Remus story from the founding of Rome. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. Also, by the way, real quick, I don't want to go on too long of a rant, because we're starting to run overtime here. But also, by the way, Dominant and Coco, I knew that wasn't aimed at us. I was just making a joke about the basement there real quick. But I know I wasn't like taking aim at you or something. But I see here, Tom Exman said, like that assassin 2 days ago, full of anger, and his parents turned him in. There are so many people that are full of anger, folks. Like, there's some legit evil people. There's always been evil people, by the way, but it seems like they're multiplying because they're getting in these groups like we just mentioned online, and they're able to find approval, and they're able to find encouragement to be even more evil and more full of vitriol because they find other like-minded hateful people and they start festering like really badly. And we're seeing like the modern radicalization of certain Americans that generally would not have been as extreme as they are now without social media radicalizing them. And that's because they're finding like-minded people that encourage that activity. So it's just very tough. Me personally, and this is just my personal opinion, Hot Dog Man and his community is a perfect example of that. That guy is so full of hatred because he's had a lot of, I guess you could say, bad goes in life, like rough patches in his life. He's become full of anger and hatred against pretty much everybody. It doesn't matter what political beliefs you have. He spews that vitriol at everybody, which, you know, we learned that ourselves. We're like, damn, this guy's just a lunatic toward everyone. Everybody finds out. Don't mess with him with a 10-foot pole because if you do, he's going to lash out at everybody. He's crazy. And also he's found this big community that he's got that is also full of hatred like that. And he basically gives them permission to be like that. And it encourages people to keep going further. So it's troublesome to see that because if those groups form enough in this country, in the United States, and people start believing that hatred is the way forward, the society will split in half and it'll crumble and it'll fall, and all of us are going to pay the price for it. So I don't know how to solve that. I really don't know how to solve that because obviously we can't infringe on the First Amendment right to free speech. That's not acceptable. But at the same time, though, we can't just ignore the issue because if we do, it could lead to the entire disintegration of our society. So I don't know how to deal with that. Maybe one day we'll figure that out. But moving on to our next one here, this one goes to Nemo, who puts in a 5. Nemo said, why can't Finland amass troops along their border? And this would force the Russians to take troops from the Eastern Front, which is better for Ukraine.
Generally, if they amass troops along the border, it could be believed by the Russians that it's a prelude to an offensive by the Finns. And while that wouldn't really make a lot of sense, you know, looking at a bigger picture, that is a likely casus belli that the Russians could use to start a preemptive attack against Finland. So that's generally why they don't do it, because it'd be considered an escalatory tactic and a prelude to an actual war. So with that, I hope that does address that well. Big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Kyle Padell once again. He said, glad you had a safe travels, Enforcer, and glad you're back.
And I thank you so much for the support, Kyle Padell, and I get to thank you for saying that you're happy that I'm back. I'm happy to be back, too, because I love doing this show, and I love to work on this thing. It's a fun time. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And a big shout out to K-Frog, who put in a 3, along with Brenda Mather, who put in a 2, and Plazoth, who put in a 2 as well. And we appreciate all 3 of you very much for that support. We also have a 2 from Tyler Harris, who said, good evening, folks, and LSA.
Hey, an LSA, and a good evening to you, and a big thanks to you for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And Squirrel puts in a 2, and said for Pinecone Grenades.
I like how you keep like the war squirrel theme going. That's a really good one. I like that. But a big thanks to you for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
I'm not sure if a squirrel has ever won a war because it turns out that the squirrel goes against the tank, which happens to be the modern automobile. I'm not sure if poor squirrel is cut out for that war.
Your bravest,
kind of like the Russians.
Your bravest squirrel soldier versus the weakest armor that that they go up against, a Chevy Tahoe.
If you really think about it, the squirrels are really like the Russians because, you know, those squirrels, they have that like whole technique that they do. They get on the curb and they'll sit there like all day long, I guess, and they'll be like, okay, where's the car? Where's the car? The car will start coming down the street and you're just driving along, mind your own business, you know, maybe listening to some music or something. So the squirrel's like, damn, it's my big moment. So that car comes down the street. The squirrel's like, okay, time it right, jumps out right in front of the wheel. So if, you know, most people will try to put the brakes on, not to squish the squirrel. So they'll be like, oh my God, a squirrel. The brake, squirrel jumps back a little bit, like to get out of the way. And then you start going again. The squirrel jumps right back in front of the tire. And you're like, what the hell's wrong with this thing? And then the squirrel eventually, like, somehow meanders its way through all 4 tires and makes its way to the other side of the road. And you're like, how the hell that thing just make it through all the 4 of the tires like that? But I don't know. The squirrels, they don't have any good sense. They're like the Russians at this point when it comes to their military.
Hold up, man. I gotta find this. Okay, so hold up, man. I gotta find this really quickly if I can. I have very little time, bruh. This is a squirrel, man. When they run into any sort of a situation. You know what? I'll hold off on that joke. You know what? I'll hold off on it. I'm not gonna do it. I think we're good. I think we're good. But
Okay.
anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
I have no idea what was coming there, but I'm scared now,
it was a meme about kamikaze pilots. It was like, you know, it's like, I don't know. It doesn't, like, I don't know. It might seem bad taste, a little bit too macabre. So like, we'll just drop it. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a 2. They said, LSA hit the like button. That's an order.
I do thank you for support, LSA Sergeant Figment. And please, folks, make sure to hit the like button. We almost hit 5,000 likes tonight. Hopefully, after everyone hits the like button, we can hit it. There's still 8.9 thousand people here. That is a lot of people. And so a big thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, do you know when a squirrel's like, their squirrel's time's up? If you see like a soccer mom in a minivan, the squirrel's got a fair chance. Like it's got a good chance. If you see like the person maybe in the Volkswagen Jetta, the squirrel's got a good chance. You see the guy in the lifted Chevy truck with the straight pipes out the back,
And the Carolina squat.
That thing is finished. That's not only is that for a squirrel finished, it's going to get extra finished. They're not missing. I've seen some people aim for the squirrels, which there's sick people out there like that. But anyways, moving on to our next one. This one goes to a Magic, who puts in a 2. Who said Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth comeback? Is that possible?
That actually would be pretty cool. Poland and Lithuania was pretty neat as a nation. So wouldn't that be neat if it did come back? I don't know. Maybe one day. But a huge thanks to you for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Pedal to the Metal 65, who puts in a 2, and said, rest in peace to Charlie.
And rest in peace, indeed. That was a terrible tragedy that happened. And I got to say, it's still something that Matthew and me were talking about before the stream today. It's something that, especially when you saw the footage that day, it was something that will stick with you for a little bit because it was very gruesome and a very bad tragedy to see. And Matthew told me today that he actually saw a video. I didn't see it, but he said he saw it to where apparently after that happened and he was falling to the ground, apparently, I believe from what you were saying, Matthew, it looked like his daughter that was there, very young daughter that he has, was scared from the sound and went running to him because she was scared. Yep. And that had happened and he was, pretty much dying on the ground when she ran up to him. I mean, that's just terrible. Like, when you think about that sort of thing, it's absolutely horrendous. What makes it really horrendous to me, though, I have to keep emphasizing that, is that his young daughter and his wife were there to see it. That's what makes it really bad. Like, it was already bad as it is. That makes it a million times worse that now that young daughter will have seen that at that age. And at that point, that poor daughter's innocence has been completely stripped away by that horrific act that happened right in front of her that nobody saw coming. But still, I have to say, rest in peace to him, and massive condolences to his family and especially his children. That has to be a terrible position that they're in at the moment. But with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I almost coughed there, but we do have a super chat here from Octavian Timurasanu, and thank you very much, Octavian, for that support as well. And also, somehow I skipped over it. I must have been taking my little momentary break there a moment ago, but thank you very much, Octavian, for that 5. He said, those views on Ukraine were misguided. What happened to Charlie Kirk was unspeakable, and condolences to his family, especially his young daughters. And I agree with that 100%, Octavian, as well. Condolences to his family, especially his wife and daughters. That is terrible. Like, it's very, very terrible. And the footage that came out from it was just horrific, like some of the most horrific stuff we've seen in a long time. And yes, his views on Ukraine were misguided, but that's the beauty of America, or what America is supposed to be about, is even though we may have strongly disagreed with his views on Ukraine, he had the right to say his opinion, and he had the right to say it in peace. So, obviously there's lunatics out there like the despicable individual, I'll just leave it at that pulled this off, that obviously don't believe in that. And those people are not Americans. They're not Americans. They're people that don't belong in this country, to be perfectly honest with you. People that don't believe in the freedom of speech. That's literally the founding concept of this country. So just evil. So whenever I'm still waiting for confirmation if they've actually got the guy this time that pulled it off, and the person that they have is actually the one that did it, and hopefully they can prove that beyond a doubt, then it sounds like Utah is going to be pursuing the death sentence, which I would say in this situation is totally appropriate. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to definitely agree. I believe we actually spoke a couple of times about Charlie Kirk on the channel over the years, and I've said many times I don't really agree with his foreign policy. Of course, we're not nuts like a lot of people are and go beyond that into insano land. But we made it clear over the years we don't really agree with his foreign policy standpoint. But just because you disagree with someone doesn't mean that they deserve to die or that what happened to him was justified. And that's what a lot of sick people don't get these days, is that yeah, you can disagree with someone and maybe they say crazy stuff. Like, that's subjective. A lot of people agreed with what he said. A lot of people didn't. But if you find it should be crazy or heinous, I mean, that still doesn't give someone a right to shoot him. Like that's just wrong at every level. It's an unfortunate thing to happen to him because I'll be honest. I didn't really agree with a lot of what he said in foreign policy. Domestic politics aside, I won't talk about that. But one thing I will respect is that the guy did go out there and he would just conversate with people, in his style, whether people liked it or not. He would still conversate with people about it and debate them. A lot of people would show up, people who would disagree with him, they'd show up to debate him. He'd debate him. I mean, it certainly was a mutual thing. People had a good time about it. It was a mutual debate. It's a terrible thing to see something like that happen to someone, because I generally think the beautiful thing about the United States is that anywhere that's designated like that is a public forum, whether it was him or another political commentator that leaned to the left, the right, whoever. America is a place that people can come forward and speak about their differing ideas and opinions, and they should have a peaceful right to be able to do that without fearing that that moment could be their last. It's a sad thing that happened to him. I mean, it would be a tragedy if that happened to anyone who was a political commentator, because they're out there talking about what they believe is important politically, whether I like it or not, whether I agree or disagree with it. It's a right that they have. And it's a terrible thing to think that the man died for doing what he did. And it was terrible to think that others in right there had to see that. It's a damn shame, really. But I do thank you for the support, Octavian, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to say that that's sort of a thing in my nation, considering that every citizen has ownership of this country, that should not happen in this country, and it should never happen in the country. It'll happen again. I can promise you all that. But whenever it happens, it's a damn terrible day. Every single time it does. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Nina, who puts in a 2. And thank you very much, Nina, for that support. They said, I don't think Poland likes the breast of Belarus.
I don't think they do either. Big thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Sitting Bear, who puts in a 2, who said 7.4 earthquake in Kamchatka last hour and tsunami warnings issued, a USGS.
And I thank you for the support, Sitting Bear, and helping the channel to keep it running. And I thank you for providing that little bit of a tidbit of information. And also, I saw some people say something. Someone said aggressive dialogue makes people do aggressive acts. I don't think you understand, though. Because you say something to someone, that doesn't give someone a right to shoot and kill you. I don't know if people disconnect with that, but nowhere in the law does it say, oh, because you spoke provocatively about a hot topic in domestic politics, you have a right to commit first-degree murder and get away with it. That doesn't exist. That's why this guy will most likely get the firing squad in Utah, and that's what's going to happen. It's the law. He committed first-degree murder. It appears to have been premeditated to the most extreme degree. It was an act of sick vileness. And also on top of that, I don't know if you know this, to the people who say this, but you have the right to say whatever the hell you want in this country and also not be murdered for it. That's what makes America different than a lot of other countries, is that we have a very wide scope and range of things that you can say in this country that are absolutely heinous. And people get away with it because we have the First Amendment. And I'll be honest with you, as far as what the guy said, I mean, a lot of it, especially with things like Ukraine, I didn't really agree with it at all. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that he had it coming to him. That's just absolutely sick. I mean, that's vile, really. I don't know how people could say that, because if you're saying that right now about him, that means that if someone went and did the same thing to you, everyone could just say, oh, he had it coming, and there'd be no justice for what happened to you. I don't know if people get that. This is a double-edged sword kind of a thing. If you wish death on other people because you disagree with them, someone could come and get you, and then everyone could just go, oh, well, we didn't agree with him, and so he had it coming. That's just stupid. That's un-American.
Sad. It's sad that even has to be discussed. It's really sad. It's obviously killing is wrong. That's a universal thing that people understand. When people have to come to something like that, it's usually in war, when it comes to something like that. And it's only as a last resort, or it's supposed to be a last resort. It's okay, if we don't defend ourselves with a war, and obviously what you have to do in war, it gets hideous, then we're going to cease to exist if we don't fight this war. It's like a last resort thing, and it's only in a war setting. Outside of that, killing is horrific, and even in the war, killing is horrific too. But it's a necessity at some points because you have to defend yourself. But it's crazy that these days you have to debate with people whether or not it was acceptable for somebody to get assassinated. It's not even a debate. It's there's killing is wrong, assassinating people is wrong, and in this country there's even laws that say you have the right to say that stuff. and you have the freedom of speech. But yet people will still argue every day, well, he said this or he said that. He could have said the most horrible things you can imagine. He still has the right to say it. And also, he definitely not only does he have the right to say it, but also has the right not to get killed for it, too.
A lot of like I just don't really know about some folks here, folks. As I'm seeing some people say, freedom of speech comes with rules of respect. No, it doesn't. You can be as offensive as you want. You can flick people off. Like the Supreme Court ruled, you can flick a cop off, and he can't shoot your ass for flicking him off. Like that's what they ruled. That he can't arrest you, he can't do anything to you because you have you have a freedom of expression, and that's a part of it. You can burn an American flag, which is incredibly offensive, even to me. But you can do it because you have a constitutional right to do it. It's a part of freedom of expression, so on and so forth. You can be as offensive with your language as you would like. Of course, there are fighting word statutes in some states that say that if you do provoke someone to violence, like by directly offending them, then that may be a justifiable defense in court for something that you may have done, like assault, battery, or even murder. But outside of that, there is no such thing as a limit in America to where, oh, you have to be decent. No, there's not. You can tell someone to F off, and you can also say the most heinous shit ever. Like I don't know if y'all look around, but there are a lot of extremist people in this country who've been around for a while. The South is known for a lot of those types of people historically that went around wearing all white and conducting heinous crimes. Of course, the crimes were illegal, but what they were saying, as offensive and heinous as it was, that was something that was allowed, still is, crazily enough, but that's a part of the First Amendment. You can say crazy stuff and get away with it in this country, and generally it's expected that you're not going to get blasted for even saying the most heinous stuff. That's just the truth of it. Whether people like to hear that or not doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but that's how the law works. That's how the First Amendment works. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Verna Weeks, who puts in the 14. And thank you, Verna, as well, for that support and also helping to keep the channel running, and we do appreciate that very, very much. We also have a 2 from StrayCat241, who said, thank you for the coverage from Southern California.
Hey, and thank you so much for support, StrayCat241, and thank you so much for enjoying our coverage all the way from Southern California. So a huge thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to AXLR, who puts in the 2 and says, Goongate. Goongate. I'll be honest with you. Like the term goon, like it has a whole new meaning now that I've never really heard of. I heard it yesterday. I was like, what the hell? How did you get that term? A goon in my book is like an accomplice or a henchman or something. Like, oh, that's so-and-so's goons over there or something like that. Now it means something totally different. I'm like, when the hell did you get that meaning behind it? But I don't know who's involved in the Goongate. But unfortunately, what say you?
And I'd have to say thank you for the support, and that was a wild one. So I do thank you for the support and help this channel to keep on running. And with that, folks, we've actually run out of super chats, and it's time for us to get on into the live chats. Of course, due to time constraints tonight, we're going to be addressing the live chats and also the Morse code. We have a fresh Morse code tonight, so we'll be getting the Morse code decoders of the stream, 3 live chats, and then rounding out the stream. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
So the Morse code decoders tonight were Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Erbo Garbo, Her Royal Fluffiness, Kush, Cobio, Terex, and Sire. And he said the Morse code says, Putin is about to learn a lesson he won't forget. The West will yield no longer, and LLT LSA.
And and that's the sound of money. Y'all got that down on the nail. That is the jackpot. I hope that ends up being true eventually. But y'all did get the Morse code message correct. And I got to say, an absolutely incredible and amazing thing that y'all did that, get that correct and dead on the nail once again. A huge shout out to the Lee Spring Army Signal Corps. And so with that, it is time for us to get on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Joe, who said, can you guys report on the ongoing civilian-led coup in Nepal? Basically, to sum it up, Gen Z is the one leading the coup in Nepal. The Gen Z individuals have gotten in the street. They are upset and angry over corruption, and they're upset and angry over the internet trying to be cut off in Nepal. So they have elected their first new leader via a Discord poll. And yes, you heard me properly, like Discord, the app. The one that me and Andrew are talking on right now for the stream. They elected their leader using a Discord poll. So Gen Z to the end, I guess you could say. But Enforcer, what say you?
That's pretty much the best summary we can give of it. And actually, it does turn out this whole thing started because they tried to ban the internet. So wild, whack. This is Gen Z stuff. I've never heard of this before. But anyways, with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to, let's see here, Tumultus, who said, if Russia invades, what are the odds it stays conventional and does not go nuclear?
The chances, in my opinion, are actually pretty decent that it would stay conventional and not go nuclear, because the Russians know that if they did go nuclear, there's a high chance they're going to end up mostly all getting killed in that. So they know that while they might end up getting a little ha-ha, at least for a minute, it's not going to last for long. So I think that the chances of an actual nuclear war breaking out, even if World War III did happen, is low. But we'll have to assess that after World War III begins, because you never know. Bad moves could be made by both sides, and then we could actually see that nuclear Armageddon is coming our way. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And also a big shout out to Big Ron 394, who threw in a 5 and said, "Thank you both for the consistency of your news reports. You remind me of the old days, like Walter Cronkite and LSA. And a big thanks to you for the support, Big Ron. We actually get the Walter Cronkite compliment a lot. Now, I gotta say that's a high honor, because a lot of people consider Walter Cronkite to be a gold standard of news reporting. So I gotta say huge thanks to you so much for the support on Matthew and my behalf, because we'd love to know that people consider this channel to be in high standing and high regard reputationally. So huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, it's time for us to get on into the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Avari Mandabratis. He said, I think we know North Korean forces and Chinese military observers are there. Oh, and yeah, I would say certainly.
Yeah.
He said, but what about Iranian, Indian, Brazilian, and Venezuelan military observers and forces? You know something interesting, Avari? The Indian military actually sent individuals to Zapad, believe it or not. Did you hear that, Enforcer?
Yeah, I actually have it up on screen right here.
Yeah, they said the Indian military actually sent individuals from their military to witness the Zapad 2025 Belarus Russian military exercises. Now, tell me that doesn't look bad. That looks bad, in my personal opinion. But Enforcer, what do you know?
And it was quite a large contingent. It was 65 personnel, most likely all officers. But I don't know about the Iranians or the Brazilians or anyone else, but we do know that the Chinese and North Koreans guaranteed to have observers and liaisons, and the Indians also have a very large contingent of observers that are there currently. So that is definitely the case. We know that with dead-on certainty. I didn't cover this earlier because I thought it was kind of like a smaller note, but since you brought up the question, then it was a really good one. I made sure to pull up the link to it immediately, which was in Grodna. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And before we round out the show for tonight, because that was the final question of the night, but we have a final question of the night bonus segment, as Danny B, chef of the LSA, has come in tonight and thrown in a 20. And Danny B said, "Good evening, Enforcers. Chef Danny here. Sorry I'm late. I want to show some love, and good night, LSA." And a big thanks to you for the support, Danny B. A better late than never is what I say, but you caught us right literally at the tail end of the show. But I do thank you massively for support, along with LSA Rocks, who threw in a 50 with no comment there. A huge thanks to you as well. Both of y'all for supporting this channel, hey, and helping this thing to keep running, because y'all make this thing possible and help us to keep it rolling. Even when we're rounding the thing out, we'll still be rolling well into tomorrow, thanks to y'all. So a huge thanks to both you, Danny B, and LSA Rocks, for y'all's massive support. And with that, folks, we're going to be rounding out tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again for being here tonight. On behalf of the entirety of the Enforcer channel, we have had 140,000 people here tonight and a peak viewership of 17.5 thousand people. Quite a large number. And I got to say that it's amazing to know that so many of y'all continue to choose this channel as your primary source of news, and we are always honored and greatly appreciative to be the ones to get to cover the news to all of y'all every day. We will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world. And with how things are going these days, tomorrow is going to be spicy, I'd assume. But still, nevertheless, we will see you all then. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, long live the Lead Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us tonight on another night of the War News stream, and a huge shout out to almost 150,000 people that were here by the very end of the stream, and we appreciate every single one of you for choosing us as your source of news. But with that, we will see you all tomorrow on the next live stream at 10 p.m. Eastern, and also maybe midday as well for another short war video if there is enough news to cover, and I would be shocked if there wasn't, to be honest with you. So we'll be there for that. But anyways, with that, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.